clearly. One of the things we started to do was check in with folks at least annually to go over the program requirements to make sure that they understood, and really started working with folks more deliberately about what's your next step, because this program is temporary, it's ending, so we need to start thinking about what you're doing after this. And then the other thing that really came out was the motor home repairs, and the challenge there is that we have one service provider, and unfortunately recently he shared that he can't continue to do this work for a while for his own health reasons, and so now we're looking for somebody else to do those repairs, because we recognize that those, one, it helps in terms of livability, but it also increases the value of their motor home so that when they get housed, they can sell it, right? It is an asset, and that's one of the things that folks don't want to give up 100%. Like, they want to be able to get something out of something that they spent so much time in. And then in terms of leveraging support, and this is part of what I think Kevin will go into as well, is just really strengthening, not the first bullet, strengthening support among community members through education, just to explain sort of what the program is and how it's changed, or what the outcomes are on a more regular basis, but also foster cross-county collaboration and look at ways that PSPP could be a model for replication. And so part of the cross-county is this program is part of a continuum of care, but sort of on the edge of a continuum of care for homeless services, because it's not something that, like, this was in response to a settlement, and so it had to happen here. But it has the opportunity to help address homelessness across the county at some point, should the county and the city decide to move in that direction. And then I have just updates. So we have provided, so since September of 2024 and as of March of 15th, so this month, so 6 months after the original or the initial evaluation came out, we've served 49 individuals from 31 families and 15 PSPP participants, or 31%. So it went up from 27 to 31% have moved to permanent housing. And we've got 3 families who are in the queue to move back to housing. One family through Catholic Charities housing subsidy, that's been on hold a little bit because of staffing at Catholic Charities, and then 2 others who are moving into market rate, probably within the next 1 to 2 months. And the folks who have become housed have not all gotten, I think only 3 folks got subsidies. Everybody else moved into a room or a home that they were able to pay on their own. That might have been slightly below market rate, but definitely not affordable housing. So with the support that PRC was able to provide, they were able to return to housing, even market rate, because subsidies are just not as available as we'd like to see. And then the other thing that happened when we added the SFRV resort space is that it really led to folks seeing another option, right? Whether it was they were off the streets in some place that had water, garbage, water dumping, and electricity and internet and access to showers and laundry, led them to say, I don't want to live in my motorhome anymore. What do I got to do to not do this? Or led them to think, maybe living in an RV park could work. Not in Pacifica, because you do have to move out of Pacifica, out of the RV resort every 4 months or so for like 2 weeks. But there are other places in California, not necessarily in the Bay Area, that could be more affordable, that could work for somebody to be able which we then sent to PD, who then we were able to see the license plate, so was able to go and have a conversation with those folks. And so those kinds of things had happened, and I think I mentioned increased patrol in that area to make sure that folks, and in general, right? And so we did see a decline for a period of time, which was great. And then we started to see a little more of an uptick again. And so we started to leave our van because we couldn't get a camera on one of the newer motorhomes that was there. And we left our PRC outreach van there with a camera. The challenge there was that we couldn't always get clear video because it wasn't outside of the vehicle, but we still have been monitoring that to make sure and see if there was anything, and have sent any information that we get. And again, part of the difficulty is that folks didn't always tell us that it happened, right? And so that's why we wanted to take the reporting off of their plate to tell us when it happened. And instead, I mean, if they told us when it happened, we could find the video and we could report it, right? That was a way to try to protect them. And then the other thing that had happened was in community, like not in any of the safe parking places, that folks were also being harassed on other parts of city streets. And it got pretty bad for a period of time where somebody put nails underneath somebody's tires. They graffitied on the outside. They smeared feces all over their vehicle. And that was inappropriate and, just like really extreme. And again, unfortunately, the clients didn't feel comfortable sharing, and when PD responded to something else related, then they were told about what had happened, and a police report was, but there was no way of finding out who had done anything like that. So, but like I said, it's ebbed and flowed, and we haven't gotten a lot of complaints for a while again, so that's good.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Anita. I really appreciate all that you and the PRC are doing to make this happen, and it's quite exciting, the number of people that are moving into housing. Do you happen to have statistics to compare? So if people are in a shelter or in a place like the Navigation Center, what are those percentages typically in the county?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can find out. But I feel like they're closer to 20%. That don't return, that are exited. I think one of the biggest challenges around what happens after they leave shelter is that there is no real funding for what's called a leaver study to really follow up with the folks who have left. So the assumption is that if they leave shelter and are in housing, because that's how they exited from shelter to housing, that the assumption is if they don't get back into the shelter system, it means they're still housed. But that's not actually accurate, especially if they moved out of county. There's no way to know that they're not in the system in another county. Right. So it's really, really hard to really find out unless they're connected, right? So like one of the advantages of PRC also being a core agency is that if they're able to be, and the relationships that we have with property managers in town, is that we can get people into places that are local to Pacifica and we can stay connected. And then that's a lot easier for us to know that in 6 months, a year, or 2 years, they're still housed. But we don't have the resources to proactively check in with folks if they aren't already connecting with us past 6 months.
Okay, thank you. And then just a couple more. We know the Lundy spaces have been problematic. Have you seen issues, complaints on Oceana, Milagro, especially just in the last 6 months?
Yeah, I mean, the folks there haven't shared with us anything, but staff in the past had been there for a move or repairs or check-ins and heard people honking. I think it was less of an issue there, definitely, and it never got to the point at which there was vandalism or anything like that.
Okay.
But honking happens, just not as much.
Not quite as often, okay. Mm-hmm. And then I think Councilmember Beer was asking about the partnership with the police yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how that is working out. And I know there was an officer change.
Yeah, I think that there have been some challenges with the more recent CSO and the relationship with folks who are in the program, but we work through it and continue to try to educate. The first CSO was really, really active in the program in the beginning, and was really open to kind of understanding and hearing. And, we lost him to the police force, so, which was a good thing, right? For Pacifica PD, absolutely, But sad for us, because he was awesome.
Okay. And then I have some questions about your capacity for services as part of the continuation, but you haven't talked about that yet. Maybe that's part of the continued presentation from staff.
I don't have any other lights at this time, so please carry.
Great, thank you, and thank you, Executive Director Reese. I wanted to talk a little bit about the item before the council and some of the expansion opportunities that we have. So again, the purpose of this item is for the council to consider approval of $204,000 from the city's Housing Action Fund, and that's our unrestricted housing-related fund toward expansion and continuation of the program by renting and utilizing spaces in the San Francisco RV Resort in Pacifica. I always say in Pacifica because it's confusing that it's called the San Francisco RV Resort. While there remain operational and funding details to work out, and that will be part of the next step with the PRC and other potential collaborators, such as San Mateo County. And by the way, they are our current collaborator in the first three-year program. Both the city and the county provide funding for the program. And potential collaborators, such as other potential grant funding sources. Really, the key here is that the City Council's early commitment of a significant share of the funding is important to securing the SFRV resort spaces while we have that opportunity, and making those rental arrangements and establishing the city's commitment to the continuation of the program. So the expansion summary is, and the comments that were just provided about harassment or other things that have happened as any new innovative program begins, there's going to be a learning curve and a break-in period, which has gone well, but the expansion into the 10 spaces in SFRV really allows potentially expanding the program up to 18 spaces from the current operational 9 spaces, or to 15 if the decision is made that the Lundy site shouldn't be used anymore, or that could be, depending on the number of clients that are on the waiting list or needing to be served, could be used in that case. And that is one of the operational details we need to work out with the PRC in moving forward. I don't want to repeat myself, scrolling down a little bit. I'll talk a little bit about some of the PRC operational requirements and the costs related to that. And then I'll mention a few alternatives the council could consider to the recommendation as well. But the $204,000 represents rental of 10 spaces in SFRV for 1 year. That's where that number comes from. But just renting the spaces isn't the entirety of the program. And as Ms. Reese said, casework to support the clients is really critical to the success of this program. So in terms of numbers that Ms. Reese had provided, the annual funding, the city contributes $100,000 this last fiscal year. Used to be $100,000 to the PRC. That's our annual contribution to their operations, and that funds core work for PRC. So that funding is not intended and can't go towards this program. The PRC can utilize other homeless outreach funding to continue outreach for the program. This is other funding available through the county, but those funds only have the capacity to provide case management services to up to 5 program families. So 5 out of, if the program expands to 15, 5 out of 15. So without additional programmatic funding, particularly for case management, the PRC would not expect to have the same outcomes as the first 3 years of the program, which we just heard is a 31% return to permanent housing. Again, the case management is a key aspect, ingredient to this formula. Continuing the operation with the level of case management currently provided would cost $104,000 for 6 months, $208,000 for a year. So that's above and beyond the $204 just to rent the spaces in SFRV. And, but at a minimum, to continue the program with minimal coordination and management of the permits, PRC would need an additional $20,000 for 6 months, $40,000 for a year. And as Ms. Reese mentioned, that's just to operate the logistics of rotation of the RVs and such, not to provide case management services. So the next steps, before I just mention alternative actions, the next steps would be following council's direction about extending and expanding the temporary safe parking program, and depending on the level of funding approved, the city manager will work in cooperation with the PRC and the SFRV resort to secure the rental spaces, and that's sort of the time critical factor because SFRV is running a business and they are looking to a commitment towards needing a commitment. And will work in cooperation with the PRC to seek continuing county participation in this successful program, and will extend the operating agreement. The city has executed an operating agreement with the PRC, lays out all the responsibilities, what the city does, what the PRC does. So we'd look to extending the operating agreement and return to council for any necessary approvals of agreements and or funding allocations at that time. So the alternative actions I've identified are fairly simple. Decline to continue the program, letting it end by June 28th, 2025. That's the end date, that's the 3-year end date to the program. Consider committing less funding to the continuation and expansion of the program, specifying the amount that would be less and directing the city manager to pursue financial contributions from other sources, or on the opposite end, consider committing more funding to the continuation and expansion of the program in order to cover PRC operating costs for a period of time, and if so, council specifying what that amount would be. So we have a basic recommendation, a few alternatives, and that completes my presentation, and Ms. Reese and I are available to answer any further questions.
I want to let the council know and everyone know that I have 8 cards, and I don't know who online yet. Do we want to ask questions now? Do we want to wait for public comment and ask questions? What's your pleasure?
Public comment, please.
All right, let's open public comment, and I'll start with first 3 people, Suzanne Moore, Marianne Carnock, and John James.
Hello again, everyone. My name is Suzanne Moore from District 2. I'm a retired family nurse practitioner for the County of San Mateo. I'm a member of Pacifica Housing for All. I'm a sitting board member for Healthcare for the Homeless and Farm Workers program for the county. I am a newbie to the PRC board. I live 5 blocks from the 5 spaces on the safe parking program on Oceana and Milagro Drive. I'm speaking for myself this evening. I don't usually bore you with all my accolades, but I think it's important for people to know a little bit of background for the context of remarks. I'm grateful for the hard work of the PRC staff responsible for the success of our safe parking program. In spite of a critical shortage of affordable housing, the PRC found permanent homes for 27% of program participants and created housing goals for an additional 85%. All participants were or are Pacificans, many of whom were formerly housed and priced out of their housing here in our town. While it's difficult to ascertain without collected data, we can guess that the cost of preventing homelessness and providing temporary housing with wraparound services is far exceeded by the cost of chronic homelessness. We also should be moved by existing data that demonstrates housing supports longevity and health, and the data that suggests community benefits of local housing stability. Thank you, Pacifica, for committing monies to the Safe Parking Program extension. Please collaborate with the county to further the life and success of the program. This is an investment that helps all Pacificans. Thank you.
All right, Marianne Carno, I think, Carnock, and John James.
Oh, hello, I'm a Pacifica resident for 35 years. I live on Milagro Drive. And I have questions concerning this, that the 13 RVs that we had to find spaces for, and I know we have 5 on Oceana in our area, in the Manor area. Why would they not go into the San Francisco RV park instead of being on the street? Be the first ones to go in there instead of expanding the program and adding, I don't know, people from other areas into the RV park. That area on Oceana, I know the buses have a hard time, getting past the RVs. It just seems like, expanding this program to have even more RVs in Pacifica. I disagree. I see more RVs than ever in the Sharp Park area, in the neighborhoods. I see, all along the ocean, in the Manor area. It's one RV after the next. They get ticketed. It just seems like they get ticketed, but they never get towed away. Nothing ever happens. You walk along the beach there, it smells like urine. At least the ones that are on Oceana with this program, with them having their waste taken care of. They do keep the area clean, and thank goodness for that. But it just seems like they should be the first ones to get them off the street to be put in the San Francisco RV park. And when you say temporary, how long is temporary that Pacifica is going to be paying for this RV park? And what are your plans to, take care of all these RVs that are along the ocean? Because it doesn't seem like that is being addressed.
Thank you. John James, Elizabeth Bradal, and Gloria Stofan.
John James from District 2, so our esteemed council member is, I think, supportive of this. I wanted to also give a little bit of background why I am in support of this program. I grew up not quite as sophisticated as I am today, which is not very, but as a preteen and a teenager, I got to use government housing, but it was in the form of the Wildwood, New Jersey City Jail. And I was living rough, I was a runaway. And then, luckily, I ran into my first girlfriend, my first real girlfriend. She was also my first wife, and my current wife, just to be clear.
Good answer.
So with her encouragement or demands, I sort of settled down a bit and found employment with the government. The police call it forced service. But the government then, with the help of my wife, paid for my housing, my education, my clothing, my uniforms, and everything else, and provided me with the tools to become a slightly more productive citizen. They did it by force, But the Resource Center does it through care and understanding and a plan. So over the last 40 years that my wife and I have lived in Pacifica, we've been donors, volunteers, my wife really, and big supporters of the Resource Center. And I think that for them to turn citizens that are currently in distress and living in RVs, and the contribution rate that they make to turning them into sustaining members of the community helps the values of the property in the community. It helps those people contribute back to the community. And I think that it's not just the renting of spaces, it's the support and the case management that the Resource Center can give that makes this successful. So that's my...
Thank you. Elizabeth Burdall, Gloria Stofan, and Ellen Haig.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Burdall, and I've lived in Pacifica for 36 years. I want to thank the City Council and City Manager Woodhouse for considering extending the safe parking program. This program has had success in returning many of its participants to permanent housing. It has increased the quality of life for community members living in RVs, and these are members of our Pacifica community. They are deserving of dignity and grace, and I urge the council to vote to continue the safe parking program. Thank you.
Thank you. Gloria Stofan, Ellen Haig, and someone else, which I'll tell you in a minute.
Good evening, City Council members and city staff. My name's Gloria Stofan, a long-time resident of Pacifica and a member of Pacifica Housing for All. I first want to thank the City Council, those former City Council members as well, and City Manager for considering an extension of the Pacifica Safe Parking Program, and also for your services to the community. I appreciate you as leaders of this community in receiving what I consider a supportive and successful program, the Pacifica Safe Parking Program. I would also like to add that this is the only one on the coast, the only safe parking program on the coast. This safe parking program all began in 2022, and due to the lack of scarcity of medium to low income housing here on the coast, many were our seniors and the disabled who lived on fixed incomes and found themselves unable to afford housing or money to move. The Pacifica Safe Parking Program has helped many maintain health and safety rules, as well as finding permanent housing for 15 individuals. 31%, I believe, was the data, to be exact. In recognizing how important this program is to Pacifica and to the coast side, I am so grateful to City Manager Woodhouse in proposing an extension of this program, reserving 10 spaces at the San Francisco RV Resort. However, if it's approved, case management and funding for the case management is necessary for strong housing outcomes. I urge you to strongly consider this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Ellen Haig, Cliff Lawrence, Tiger Jazz, Twirls Big Stick.
Good evening, City Council members, staff, and City Manager. My name is Ellen Haig. I'm a longtime resident of Pacifica and a leader with Coastside Faith in Action. I'd like to thank the City Council and members of the community as well who have supported the Pacifica Safe Parking Program. There have been challenges along the way, but the program has successfully served individuals and families living in their motorhomes. Because of the safe parking program, 31%, as was mentioned earlier, of the people have been able to return to permanent housing. But people are not statistics. Each one of these members of our community have been able to move on in their lives and to thrive because of the support of Pacifica Resource Center and fellow Pacificans. I urge you to continue the safe parking program and funding for case management. While continuing the safe parking program is in part a financial decision, it is also a moral decision. As you know, Pacifica has no shelters for members of our community who are without housing. A safe parking program is something we can do. Please, I urge you to continue funding for the safe parking program. Thank you.
Thank you. Cliff Lawrence, Tiger Jazz Trolls Big Stick, Sue Degree.
Thank you again. Thank you, Manager Woodhouse, for this program. Thank you for extending it. We talk about our signs are we're against hate and we're for love. The word that resonates most for me is compassion. And we have a lot of people in this community who are in sore need of compassion. I've got a tenter frequently. I see braving the elements. I see a large number of vehicles, and I'm sure everybody else does too, coming down Esplanade. And it makes me wonder how long your waiting list is for this program. And if there is any opportunity to even expand it. The counseling and the guidance is what makes this work. And restoring hope to people is priceless. Thank you.
Thank you. Tiger Jazz, Sue Degree, Marge Davis.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. I am Tiger Jazz Trolls Big Stick of Pacifica. Something that Director Reese with the Resource Center said resonated with me, something to do with feeling safe, and both the participants in the program feeling safe, as well as members of our community who are housed feeling safe, and this seems to strike that correct balance. I served as one of the board members for the Resource Center for 5 years. I've served as the vice president of the board prior to being on council. I was the liaison to the board while on council. I'm sad to say that as I will likely miss the board meeting in March, having missed also the board meeting in January, this will be the longest amount of time in about 10 years that I've gone without attending a PRC board meeting. So I think that after the oversized vehicle ordinance was passed, also was passed an opportunity to ensure that the right balance was struck with making sure that members of our community that may need assistance in not living in an RV were addressed. It is rare that I invoke the term morality because I think it is often subjective. But personally, I have a very specific definition of morality in terms of those whom seek help. And for me, one of my very narrow, closely defined moral imperatives is that if a human being honestly comes to me seeking help, not to drag me down with them, but to seek help up, and I am in a position in which I am capable of offering that assistance, then I am morally obligated to do so. So I think that since we were obligated to follow through on the safe parking program, which I think at one point in time was rather a missed opportunity, now that we have an opportunity to transfer it substantially to a place that is in better alignment with our community's needs, both those whom are seeking help as well as those whom do not wish to see people living on the street, ultimately, is what it boils down to. I would hope that this council sees the wisdom in continuing the program in such terms. I also wanted to suggest that, as you all, I'm sure, have already established or are establishing a relationship with our county supervisor, Ray Mueller, such are opportunities to go after Measure K funding, as ultimately this is part and parcel with a contribution to the entirety of the county. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sue Degree, Marge Davis.
Thank you. I concur with all the other statements, and I just want to do a shout out and appreciation and recognition of our PRC. We're very fortunate in this community to have the PRC, and with Anita Reese and her wonderful staff. This is a very delicate situation. People in stress, becoming unglued by what life circumstances hitting them. And Anita and her staff are amazing in their ability to be creative and proactive and to touch the hearts of people who are in stress and probably don't trust anybody. That's not easy work. It's hard work, and I'm sure they go to bed at night tired and worried. And I just want to express deep admiration for what they do and the collaboratives with other agencies in the county as well as the city. And so I just think this is unique. PRC, Anita and her staff, thank you so much. And you're doing safety for the people in stress, but also for our community. I think the ability to have the refuge, the debris that happens, I mean, we're human beings, we have debris, and to be able to dispose of that with dignity for both communities is huge. And I'm just extremely impressed and grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Marge Davis.
Thank you. I'm Marge Davis. I'm speaking for myself as an individual, but I am a member of the PRC board. I am proudly saying that tonight. I agree with what everyone said, but I wanted to add just a couple of things. I really appreciate Kevin asking you for the funds for the spaces at the RV park, but I think we all recognize that the case management is really at the core of the results from this program. It's the heart of the program, and the results of moving people into permanent housing also make spaces for other people to come into the program. So I really strongly encourage you to think about approving the spaces without approving the case management piece. The expense of that is, to me, not the complete picture, and that's so much at the heart of the program. And Anita and her team have stepped forward. They've done a wonderful job with this. They have the historical relationship with clients, as all the stuff Sue Degree just said. But there's also some cost avoidance with making this decision tonight, and specifically with making the decision to continue compensating the PRC for the case management. And that is that the program, although we are graciously, as the kind and compassionate community I know us to be, deciding to continue this, and I think the park is a great solution. But the ACLU won a judgment that required 9 of 13 spaces. One could view that a one-year extension, since we only had 9, if you do the straight line math, is really our obligation. And to really make it succeed, we want the PRC. And if Anita and her team wasn't willing to continue that work, then there's the cost of staff time to go out for a proposal. There's attorney's costs that could be avoided if ACLU decided to take us back to court because the judgment hasn't been fulfilled. And I'm not throwing that out as a threat, because I don't think anyone would threaten us with it, but it is part of the total cost of continuing the program. The spaces, the case management, and the avoidance of other costs that could come at us if we don't make this decision. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I have no further cards from the audience. Is there anyone on the phone?
There's one raised hand. It is for David Rakowski.
Please go ahead.
Hi, I'm actually Joanne Rokoski. I just didn't have an opportunity to change the name. I'm the wife, and I'm a resident of El Granada, as is he actually. And as a member of the coast side, just a little bit to the south of Pacifica, I've been following the safe parking program in Pacifica with a great deal of interest, partly because it's my hope that such a program could be implemented eventually throughout the coast side. We all know the challenges of staying housed in San Mateo County right now. On January 25th, 2024, with the one-day homeless count, 1,145 individuals were counted who were living outside of a shelter. And that was a number that included 40% in RVs and 31% in a car or van. And at this count, after considering Redwood City, which was the highest, the second highest count was in Pacifica. And after that, unincorporated the county, particularly the coast side. So we need to address this problem, and providing safe parking for those whose only housing option is a car or van is one option. On the coast side, with very few shelter beds available, it is actually one of the very few options that we have. So I applaud the efforts of Pacifica thus far, and I hope that you will continue this program. The combination of safe and secure parking combined with case management can make a huge difference in someone's life and contribute to the health of the entire community. The current program returned over 30% of the individuals served to permanent housing. You changed their lives. And it accomplished this by providing individualized case management. That's a component that we know from the program at Coast House in Half Moon Bay is absolutely essential to success. And furthermore, by providing access to fresh water and to approved black and gray water dumping, the program also protects the environment. So I urge you, Pacifica City Council, to extend the safe parking program with funding for case management services. Thank you very much for the opportunity to make a comment.
Thank you.
There are no other raised hands.
Thank you. And I have no additional cards, so I will close public comment and bring it back to the council. Council members, comments, questions? I don't have any lights. Who would like to go? You don't have to ring the light. Go ahead.
There was one question from a community member about why we still have those spaces on Milagro and Oceana, and I'm not sure that was explained tonight. I know it's in the staff report, but perhaps you or Anita can explain the reason we still have some street spaces, even with these spaces in the RV park.
Yeah, I think Executive Director Reese can kind of comment more about the operational components of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned with the RV park, they do require you to leave every at least 4 months or less. And so we came up with a strategy that uses 10 spaces inside, 5 spaces outside, and they would cycle in. So took a while to figure out how to make that work, but I did. But the first month or two, it would be basically like the folks outside would stay for a month, and then they would cycle in, and 5 folks would cycle out. They would stay out on Milagro and Oceana for 2 months, and then another group would cycle out. So basically, after those first 2 rounds, once folks got into into the RV park, they would stay for 3 full months, but the folks outside would move 1 or 2 months. So everybody would have a 1 month, a 2 month, and a 3 month stay. So it would actually move it from, and it's not really months because again, the weeks are easier. So it would be 4 weeks, 8 weeks, or 13 weeks to make that process happen. So we need the outside spaces because of that. They can't stay longer than 4 months.
Thank you. And can you tell me how many people are on the wait list now for the program?
Yeah, currently we have 2 folks who are 2 households that are currently on the wait list and others that we continue to reach out to. So we have been doing an unofficial count of people who are in motorhomes in Pacifica that we believe to be sleeping in them. And there's about 25 to 30 on any given day. It fluctuates because folks leave and some people aren't really staying long term. And so one of the things that we've been trying to do is connect with those folks. So there are varying degrees of interest in participating in the program, but having an extension and using the RV park would be something, and being able to stay in one location for not just 4 weeks, but 4 to 8 to 13 weeks would be a significant change in the quality of their lives, and they may be more open to it. Not to mention with the work that's happening along Esplanade that's coming soon, right? That means that those folks are going to be displaced and they may be more willing and interested in participating in the program. I imagine a percentage of them are going to leave the area because they just don't want to stay. And then others who want to stay in the area would participate.
Okay. And then the staff report said the operational and the funding is to be worked out. So at this point, we don't, well, I mean, I guess, sorry, I'm still trying to wrap my head around.
Sure.
So we have the money that we know we need for the spaces, which works out to about $1,700 a month.
Yes.
And then operationally about $208,000 a year, and the city used to contribute $120 a year. Is that right? As part
Yes,
of
from the
original
Safe Parking program originally, yeah.
Okay, so
For the first
it's
3.
really another $88,000 that you're looking for funding, and has outreach. I know you've spoken with the county, and they're still trying to figure out their budget, right, and aren't ready to commit.
Councilmember Bowles, Mayor Pro Tem Bowles. So the city's 3-year commitment, we used American Rescue Plan Act funding for the first 3 years, the $120 per year. That ends in June. So if that's an alternative or a question before the council is if you wanted to contribute funding towards the operation of the program. But that's not an ongoing source of, the $120,000 is not an ongoing
And that's
source.
what I'm trying to understand, because for me, I agree with a lot of the public comments that the services are as important as the parking spaces. And so trying to understand where that money would come from, when we would know if we would have that money, and otherwise, where would it come from? Because you've talked about the money for the spaces coming from the housing fund, but where would the money for the operations?
Right. And so one of the strategies here is that the council is taking a significant step to commit a significant amount of money towards this program, $204,000. It could be whatever amount the council wanted, but that's a catalyst for the conversation to bring other collaborators like the county or potentially on a longer term other grant funding into the program. So that's work that's yet to be done to secure that, and would be, we've Anita and I have both already talked with county executive staff, and we need to follow up on those conversations. But this is really, a catalyst that could help that conversation. That's the intent.
But my concern is what happens if we don't get it, and at that point, would you come back to us? I mean, would we be signing the lease for these spaces now before having funds necessarily appropriated for the services?
I can't, again, another work item is to talk and negotiate with SFRV and talk about timeline, so I can't speak specifics about when they need a check cut, but the ideal scenario would be that we've cobbled together all the funding for the casework support and the spaces for at least a 6-month period, at least to initiate that.
Councilmember Wright and then Councilmember Beer.
Well, first I want to thank you, Anita, not just you, but your staff and all your board members too, for all the work you do. It's super important to our community. Kevin, if we do commit to, say, 6 months of funding for them, would that preclude us from seeking additional funds to support this program and offset at least not the parking spots, but the supportive caseworker wraparound services that they offer? That wouldn't preclude us from going and seeking funding to reduce some of our expense on that 6 months? So we can...
You're saying if we committed the $204,000 for the spaces plus 6 months of operating costs, which is 100 and something, 104, would that preclude us from seeking additional funding?
From seeking reimbursement from the county, for example.
So my experience is that once money is committed, you're not going to get someone to give you money to reimburse or supplant that money that you've already committed. So I think at that point, it would be even a stronger financial commitment from the council to our potential collaborators like the county or others to say, we're funding this operationally, case support and rental spaces for maybe rental spaces for a year, case support for 6 months, and we want you to add on to that for the additional 6 months of case support at least, if not beyond.
And is that 6-month period what staff thinks is sufficient in order to seek that and secure that additional funding to keep the program fully funded through the 1 year?
Well, I think, yes, that allows more breathing room, although one of the timelines would be, especially in conversation with the county, would be on a fiscal year basis. So we would be talking with them, trying to secure their participation before, during this budget season this spring. But at least 6 months would allow more. And I'd ask Executive Director Reese about, grant application timelines or other that might apply.
Yeah, I mean, so I have spoken with the county exec's office about this idea, right? Always our intention was to get the evaluation, present that to the county and say, hey, this could be a solution for the folks who are unhoused. As one of the callers said, there was 40% of the folks who are counted on the one-day homeless count that are in motorhomes. So we know, just kind of by counting, we have about 25 of those folks in Pacifica, and in working along the coast, there's at least another 25. So there's 50 folks along the coast minimum, right? There is one encampment of motorhomes in Menlo Park that is 50 people, right, already. That's also exists. So when you think about just the area, there's a significant need in San Mateo County in particular. And 2 years ago, the city of Half Moon Bay received funding to create a safe parking program in Half Moon Bay. They had partners set up, everything was kind of put together. The location fell through. There is a need, they recognized a need, the county recognized a need to have something like that on the coast, but there was no location. And so you as a council, us as a city, can present this idea to the county and say, we are in support of something like this and we want to be part of the solution, and we have more chance of getting it either incorporated into the county's continuum of care at some point in the future, or at least some initial funding to see how it goes, because I don't know of any other RV safe parking program that has an RV park as a partner.
Right.
I don't know of any other one that exists. So this is new, right? This is a new evolution of the program that council created. And so we don't know yet, right? I feel that based on our experience and our experience with the RV park, that it's a great opportunity to test, and I think that the county would not be thinking forward to not do it. But at the same time, there's concerns at the federal level about funding, and there's they're not a freeze, but they're concerned about using Measure K funds for anything outside of core needs. So timing-wise, it's not the best time to create a new program, but it doesn't mean that it won't be supported at some point. So I think that really it's like get through this first year, see what else is possible. I think the county is interested in seeing our outcomes and seeing what we might be able to do, and they might be willing, similar to what they did the first round, is they contributed $400,000 in ARPA funds to support this program. And so to ask them to do something similar with discretionary funds or something like that, I think is within the realm of possibility. And there are some funding opportunities. I had checked with CDBG in the past, Community Development Block Grant. Yeah.
That we don't
I checked
qualify
with
for.
him because we have CSBG too. So, but yeah, CDBG at the county or at the federal county level through the Department of Housing. I had asked in the past when we were looking for funding, would a safe parking program be allowable to request funds for shelter operations? Because that's basically what a safe parking program is. It's a scattered site shelter program, temporary shelter program in their own vehicles, right? So if we frame it that way, there's potential to get funding from the Department of Housing. And then there are some other foundations that support this work, but timing-wise, it wasn't something that we could apply for. And we didn't know what was going to happen after June. So we really weren't looking for funding after June because it's technically over without support from the council to continue beyond this time.
So Kevin, just one last question. Would there be anything to, like, if we gave 6 months of funding, there would be nothing to stop you from bringing this issue back to us in the event that you couldn't secure any additional funding or Anita couldn't secure any additional funding? Is that true?
That's correct.
Councilmember Beer.
Awesome, thank you so much.
I know you've been holding your.
I know. So for starters, I want the community to understand that when the Safe Parking Program was first put into play, the relationship with SFRB Park was not there. And so Anita and the people at PRC and our city manager worked really hard over the past few years to create this relationship with the SFRB Park. So it really is kind of a miracle that this is happening. And so please understand how hard they work. So thank you so much to both of you for putting in the time and effort to create that relationship. We're very lucky that there's new folks there. I've seen how well they treat the people inside the parks because I had my friends staying there. They created a community there. And so it's a lot different than it used to be. So I'm super grateful for that. When we look at Coast House in Half Moon Bay, it's not Coast Hope that runs the programming for Coast House, right? It's Life Moves.
Now it's We Hope.
We Hope,
Yeah,
right.
We Hope took over.
It's an outside agency,
Yes.
right? So it went out to an RFP, and that's how the program is run. And so I know that the capacity of PRC is not necessarily to run this program forever, right? And in order for us to create, so it's going to take time. This is my point. It's going to take time for us, and I think that all of us up here on the dais are responsible for talking to our representatives of the county. I think that's our job. I think we need to take the time to do that, and I think it takes time. And so I don't think that 6 months is enough. Kevin, how much money is in the housing fund?
The Housing Action Fund's current balance is approximately $2.9 million.
Great, thank you so much. I think the money should come out of the housing fund, and I think that in order for all of this to work, right, because we want it to work, it has worked. People need to understand how hard it is to get someone housed and what that case management looks like, not just while they're getting them housed, but afterwards. Because let me tell you, it is a really hard process to go from shelter into housing. So I think that we should take the full amount of the money out of the housing fund, which in my calculations is $452,000. I could be wrong. to pay for the spaces and the case management for a year to give us and PRC and the city enough time to really get out there and talk to our state representatives and our assemblymen and Ray Mueller and whoever else is on the county board of supervisors to get buy-in so that eventually there can be an RFP that goes out to an outside agency to run the program.
And just to clarify, I think the 1 year full cost would be 204 for the rental, 208 for the casework support for 15 or?
It'd be 15 people.
Yeah.
Well, it'd be 15 families, and as they transition out,
Yeah.
then there'd be new people coming in.
Right.
Yeah.
And then
So-
you said something
so
about extra 40.
412. The minimum continuation of 40,000 is if you weren't doing the case management. I think
Oh,
that's-
got it.
That's in, management of that program is included in the 208.
Okay, appreciate it.
So 412 would be the total
Okay.
amount for a full year.
So that's what I'm proposing, and I like to hear what my colleagues have to say about that. And before I stop talking, thank you so much for helping our families.
Okay. Councilmember Espinoza, did you want to contribute something?
I just want to say thank you to Anita for what she does. I was a board member for PRC, and I am very happy to see what you're doing with helping the community, because it's not also helping them, you're helping the community too. So thank you so much.
I'm super impressed with the work that's gone on to date. I appreciate the partnership of public safety in this process, and I think that's going to need to be an ongoing relationship. So while that hasn't been quantified as a cost here, it was mentioned in the staff report, that's going to be an ongoing cost and investment for the city. I wanted to double check with the city manager about the waste dump station and the dumpsters for that we're currently utilizing. What is the plan there?
So in terms of the weight, so the actual garbage and recycling disposal, I believe, and Ms. Reese can correct me, but I think Recology is providing
At
that.
the, where we do the black and gray water
Yeah.
disposal,
And-
they have.
So it's an operational detail I think we need to talk about with the black and gray water because it's a discussion with SFRV. So the RVs that are at SFRV have hookups.
I know.
And in a brief conversation on Friday morning with the SFRB manager, he had mentioned something about, providing that resource for the others. So we need, there could be a little extra cost to continue that program if we weren't able to run it all through SFRV.
Okay.
So more to come
More to come on that.
I
All right, one way or another, it sounds like there may be a little bit of extra cost around that. Okay, I got that.
And one other question, even though we are funding for a year, can we also get any San Mateo County official to help us to maybe do another year or so?
Yeah, that's what Mary's proposing, is we need a solid year to buy the time to make those connections, to get that story told, to be, approaching foundations, they need to see that kind of annual investment. So I would support Mary Beer's suggestion for $412,000
Could I ask?
from the housing something fund. Housing, wait,
And case management?
Housing Action Fund, Fund 21.
Oh, then, case, okay.
Could I ask a quick question? Kevin, how does that line up in the event that we are able to secure either funding through the state or the county? How does that time horizon line up with when they start their calendar?
Well, since this funding would start at the end of June, beginning of July, it would line up nicely for a fiscal year for the county. Again, I'm not sure about the grant cycles, so uncertain about that. But so that would give a year. I think we would want to try to work with the county to get an obligation sooner so that we know what's going to happen with the program sooner than later and continuing it.
I'm just trying to get our cycle and their cycle lined up in order to give us even more pressure to put on them, because
Yes, exactly. So I think that year-long lines up better because then it's on their fiscal year.
My only concern about that, I'm happy approving the money for those spots and for 6 months, but to your point about, like, if we grant this money, then they're less likely to give it to us.
Are you thinking skin in the game?
I'm thinking like 6 months and then coming back to us if they don't get it, so we can approve that then. My concern is this, I mean, we haven't had a housing fund. I know we have 2 interested nonprofit developers that are looking to build extremely low-income housing, and that's really what we need in the long term. I mean, I know this is something that we can help people right now, and it's important, and I completely agree and do what we need to do, but the more money we can get from the county so that we can save our money for actually building things in Pacifica. I mean, if we can wait that 6 months, and see if we can get some help.
I hear you. And I'll defer to the city manager and to Anita on their experience with funding with the county. My thinking is this is a drop in the bucket. And the housing you're talking about, we are not funding ourselves out of this fund of $2 little million.
We can help buy
It's our
land so that they-
relationship with the county that helps us leverage our dollars with what we're doing here and leverage their dollars, and that's what ends up paying for the affordable housing that you're talking about. So I feel like having a partnership, I don't know if we can make a partnership with a 6-month program.
Yeah, and I also think that a year is going to allow everyone to plan better. So if we're only doing 6 months of something and a year of another, no, I just think that a year is just more solid. And when it comes right down to it, it's not that much more money. And so why would we have to bring it back to council for another 6 months? And I don't think it's just us giving more skin in the game. And it shows our commitment, and yeah. So I'm going to disagree with you, which I hardly ever do.
Now, I understand you, and yeah, we need to have skin in the game, but maybe we're showing too much skin in the game, and then they're not going to help us. But I'm happy to defer to you. So the other question, we haven't finalized are where the spaces are, and whether we're keeping some on Lundy or not, how many we're putting in the RV park. No to Lundy.
No to Lundy.
Okay, so what I want to make sure you guys understand is, so this is putting all of the spaces in my district. So, and I'm okay with that. My neighbors have been good with that on those other spaces, but there are issues with the RVs in the neighborhood that aren't being addressed. You've heard a little bit of that. I hear it all the time. And I think there might be needs for a little bit more services in our area if all of this is being put in this part of town. And I'm not saying what that is right now. I mean, we need a porta potty in the area. We have no porta potty. We have no toilets in any of our parks or beaches, and so people are defecating. And I know that's the different RV spaces, not these, but it's all related, right?
I think it's completely separate, and that's not before us this evening.
There's also, I was asking about police presence, and they don't typically patrol in the area. This is also part of the coastal trail where the community walks back and forth. So I want to make sure that we're sensitive if there are issues that come up, and that there's a way to bring these up. And yeah.
I just think I want to say one thing about your district. Those are voting districts. So our district is the city of Pacifica.
I understand that.
Okay,
but-
so I just want to make that myself clear, because we're not just putting them all in your district.
But
I
you're-
mean, it just seems like.
But we are, because Pedro Point has appealed those spaces.
I get it,
And because
yeah.
Lundy has been bad neighbors. And so.
Yeah.
And, right? And-
Yes, but would you
Yeah.
want to go back to Lundy if you didn't have to?
No, I don't want to. I want people to be in safe places.
Yeah.
I'm just saying the impacts will be greater in my district, and there might be some need for some extra funding, and I want to be able to bring that back if we need to.
Yeah, well, let's work on that with our
And
county partners.
Okay. I have Councilmember Wright, and then I don't know if you're finished. Do you have more?
No, have we decided, so how many spaces are we paying for? And
The proposal is 10, right?
10.
there were two options.
Mayor.
Is there a motion on the floor? I don't know if there's a motion on the floor.
We're still waiting to discuss the number of spaces, and then there'll be a motion.
On packet page 1638, it says 10 counting the one currently being used. So additional 9 spaces, 10 counting the one currently being used, correct?
Correct, in SFRV,
Yes.
yes.
Plus,
And what-
it said a
and what-
potential of 18, but maybe
The-
that was.
Yeah,
need
and,
a
and
sig-
so I think PRC and the city need to talk about the on-street spaces. The core recommendation is continuing the 5 spaces, Oceana, Milagro, and not the Lundy spaces for the reasons that were cited. But, you know, one of the conversations, Ms. Reese can chime in, I mean, if we have capacity in a waiting list, those spaces exist and could potentially be used again, right? So, but operationally, they're not as ideal as the Oceana Milagro spaces.
And if we don't have 15 people that are participating, are we still paying that rent? Or we'll put them all there and then take the ones off the street? Put the 10 there and,
Again, more conversations, negotiations need to occur with the SFRV park, and that would be one of the parameters I'd want to talk to them about. You know, that are we paying up front for 10 for a whole year? Or are we paying partially, depending on how many people we're going to use? I think they would be open to that conversation. I want to be mindful that they're a private business going out on a limb
Yes.
to commit to this, and what they see is revenue certainty
Right.
and assistance for the program, because I know the manager is very excited about the success of this program.
Yeah.
And so I want to be cognizant of their business perspective on this and the commitment that's necessary.
100%. So my understanding in the way I read the staff report is that it's a year and it's 10 spaces in the SFRV park. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that's what you thought too?
Correct.
And was that in the form of, are you prepared to make a motion on that? Or was that what
Sure, I'll
Councilmember
make a
Wright
motion.
had his light on? Do you know?
If Mary's prepared to make a motion, I'm prepared to hear the motion.
I'll make a motion. So I move to take $412,000 from the Housing Action Fund to fund the 10 spaces in the SFRV park. And then, are we talking about the other spaces tonight or no?
Continuation of the.
Continuation of the
Ground
5
service.
spots on Milagro and Oceana. That's it. That's my
And
motion.
The funds are covering the services for
Yeah, and the
PRC.
funds are covering the casework operations.
The case manager.
I don't know what they're saying, but they're saying something to you, I think, Anita.
It's covering.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Just to clarify for the motion, to clarify
think
for
we
the
got it.
motion, the 412 would cover rental of the 10 spaces and a year of PRC operation casework support for the program as it's currently operated,
Correct.
but for more spaces.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so moved by Councilmember Beer, seconded by Councilmember Wright. Please vote.
The motion made by Councilmember Beer and seconded by Councilmember Wright, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. It's 10:01. We're going to take a 5-minute break.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Very good. All right. So item 6, back to item 6 on our agenda, which is a resolution approving the city's 2024 annual progress report on the implementation of the housing element of the general plan and the 2024 annual progress report on the implementation of other elements of the general plan. We have Samantha Updegrave.
Thank you, Mayor Beckmeyer, and good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. I'm Samantha Updegrave, the Community Development Director, and I'm here tonight with Sabina Mora from Good City Company to present the annual progress reports. I am going to kind of go through a little quickly, given the hour.
Right.
So tonight we'll go over the annual progress reports, or the APRs, what they're for, where they go next, highlight some of the progress made on the other general plan elements, report out on the housing element progress, and provide a couple of technical edits to the general plan and housing element APRs. And we'll conclude with recommendations. Oops. Sorry. So the APRs are informational, and they focus on the progress made over the previous calendar year. So tonight we're focused only on 2024, and these are due annually to the state on April 1st. I keep trying to click, but move. The general plan APR will be filed with the Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation, and the housing element gets filed with Housing and Community Development, or HCD. Also provides an opportunity for public comment. So just moving right along into our general plan APR non-housing element. So there are 8 elements, excluding the housing element, that make up the 2040 general plan. And I'll just provide a few highlights tonight. So first, under economic sustainability, our Shop Pacifica campaign, the staff expanded it to nearly 60 participating businesses with more than 3,700 gift cards distributed, which injected $139,000 into our local economy with about $1,800 of cost to implement. Under circulation, we also had Approval of the Esplanade and Palmetto bike and pedestrian improvements approved by Planning Commission and City Council, and that will install new and improved bike lanes along Palmetto, West Avalon, and Esplanade. Excuse me. In our open space and communities facilities, Parks has replaced the infield at Sanchez Park, modernized and replaced backstops at Fairway Park baseball fields, and started to prepare construction drawings for the priority parks, where 4 playgrounds will receive extensive complete facility renovations. Under our conservation element, we have the Climate Action and Adaptation Task Force working on revising our CAP. And under the safety element, we've completed vulnerability assessment, including hazard mapping. And then just a couple of quick corrections to read into the record. On the general plan APR, which is packet page 167, one of the elements or one of the implementing actions was incorrectly identified. It should be conservation implementation 72 instead of 71, removal of barriers to public participation, implement efforts to remove barriers that may prevent underrepresented communities from public participation opportunities. So that will be revised in the final report that gets filed with LCI. And then on the general plan, on packet page 169, the ADU information was left blank. Sorry about that. The city received 25 applications for 47 accessory dwelling units in 2024. And all of those were approved ministerially, and 16 received their building permit. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sabina for the housing element APR.
Thank you, Samantha. My name is Sabina Mora, and I'm with Good City Company, and I worked on the Housing Element Annual Progress Report along with planning staff this year. So as Samantha mentioned, this is required of all jurisdictions in California to submit April 1st of every year. For this year, we are reporting on progress made during calendar year 2024, and we're reporting against the housing element as adopted in January of 2024. Oh, sure. No, I got it. So a couple of things about the APR. It's required to be submitted on tables that are provided to cities by HCD. And these tables have various components to them. The overall purpose is to gauge overall progress towards meeting RHNA. And the tables have a lot of data. Some of the information included are applications deemed complete in 2024, certificates of occupancy, entitlements approved, building permits, and also a progress report on all housing element programs, as well as miscellaneous other items, several which were not applicable to Pacifica. And those tables are included in attachment 1 of your packet. Just to go over a couple of key observations that we wanted to highlight. Oh, sorry. See where the slides are here. Okay, gotcha. Sorry about that. First, I'll go over a couple of key observations to highlight. Just generally overall, the data is consistent with last year, although the indicators show slightly less development activity, but not enough to be like a big pattern. The second is just a couple of typos in the staff report are listed in these slides, and we'll make sure that those are corrected for the HCD submittal. And then lastly, there are a few technical corrections that I will read into the record at the end. So as far as the key observations, so we had 20 building permits in 2024. That's slightly lower than 2023. we had 397 housing unit applications, and that was a substantial increase from 2023, which we had 78. Although most of those applications are due to 2 pending projects, one that has 225 units and another one that has 117 units. Then we did have 2 entitlements in 2024, and so that is actually consistent with past years. It's usually quite low, and in 2023 there was an unusually high number just due to the 930 Odstad project, which entitled 70 units. And lastly, there was 43 certificates of occupancy issued, which in 2024, and there was 48 in 2023. Now I'd just like to talk a little bit about ADUs because ADUs makes up a significant portion of what we saw in 2024. So just for ADUs alone, we had 41 certificates of occupancy compared to 2023 where we had 44. New applications for ADU, Samantha mentioned we had in the general plan report, we had 25 applications, and within those applications there was 47 ADUs. And then we just wanted to highlight a couple of key programs. Table D in the attachment includes all the housing element programs and their status. We just wanted to highlight a couple. The big one is initiating the regulatory framework for RENA sites. And so this is a series of implementation actions that are part of Housing Element Program 1. And staff made significant progress towards implementing this and continues to, and the final EIR expected for those for that rezoning project is expected in May of 2025. And then there was significant participation in the city in ADU resources that are available. The city participates in the San Mateo County ADU Resource Center, and they've provided a lot of resources for ADUs, including an online plans gallery and an ADU one-stop. That concludes the overall presentation on the housing element APR. There's a couple of technical corrections I'll read into the record. One of them is the addition of the following text regarding affordability assigned to ADUs on Exhibit A, Table A, and Table A2 located on page 142 and 143 of the meeting packet. These should have the following added as a footnote. Actual affordability of individual ADUs is not known. Affordability of ADUs on Tables A and A2 were assigned sequentially based on HCD approved criteria. Exhibit A, Table D, Meeting Packet 49 has a typo in the program status. The city cannot submit additional amendments until after its new LUP is certified, which is slated for a California Coastal Commission hearing in May of 2025. And then lastly, we will need to add a project, Pacific View, on Hickey Boulevard and Monterey Road, which has 37 units, to Table A, which is completed applications.
Great. Thank you so much, Sabina. Oh, can you go back one? Oh. Sorry, how do I go back? Oh, this one. So the staff's recommendation is to adopt a resolution to approve the city's 2024 annual progress report on implementation of the housing element and the general plan, and the 2024 annual progress report on implementation of other elements of the general plan, with the minor corrections to the general plan and housing element APR reports that were noted in the presentation, and to direct the city manager to transmit the reports to HCD and LCI. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions from the council?
Can we go to public comment first?
We could. I have one card for item 6, and that person is Suzanne Moore. Maybe she'll call in. We'll check on the
She
phone.
left.
She might call. She might call. No, not yet. Keep an eye, will you, and let me know if you see it. Oh, thank you. Okay. So, seeing no other cards coming up here, no other hands raised, we'll close public comment for the moment and then reopen if we need to. Okay. So I'm sure council members have questions. Where do we want to start? Christine?
I can go first.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I'm not pointing you to a particular thing, but, so you talked about the applications that we've received for 397 units, and I'm just curious how many of those were builder's remedy projects? I know the two that you mentioned, the 225 and 117, but if you're adding Pacific View.
With Pacific View, that would be 3. All 3 of those larger projects are builder remedy projects.
So out of those 397, is that the majority of those units?
Yes.
Okay.
Did you know what amount is affordable housing or below market rate?
Of the 397, which ones are affordable?
Yes.
I don't think we have that off the top of, we'd have to look at the detailed data and do a tally, so we don't have that off the, top of our heads right now.
No, that's okay. No, that's a good question, and actually I was going to ask about, so you said 43 certificates of occupancy. Are any of those from 801 Fassler?
801 Fassler has not received certificate of occupancy to date.
Okay. And if I'm correct, I know they're offering some of the units for sale, and my understanding is 4 of those units are supposed to be available to very low income and moderate income.
For 801 Fassler?
Right.
They're not part of the 2024 in terms of the certificate of occupancy. I don't have any information on those
No,
tonight.
it's in the report on your tables as one of the projects, so, okay.
Thank you.
I understand it's not part of this report, so I won't ask now.
So I did find for the 397.
Could you check your mic, please? Thank you.
For the 397 applications, on Table A, there is income distribution of those, and this is the best information the city has at this time based on applications, so this is definitely could change, and these are not necessarily entitled projects, but what we have in the applications is 15 low-income, non-deed restricted, low-income deed restricted 69, and low-income non-deed restricted 14. So that's on Table A, and it's the first row of Table A in the attachment.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, okay, sorry.
So I just wanted to make a point to the public. I mean, these applications we're getting are primarily applications that aren't complying with our zoning code, right? And that we unfortunately don't have much to say, but that's why we need to get this housing element approved.
Exactly.
Okay, and I'll ask further questions about those privately, but, and then I was confused because there was a comment on packet page 153 about the emergency shelter ordinance that I know we did, but it was unclear from staff's answer whether that has actually been submitted to the Coastal Commission at this point.
I do believe that I know that it hasn't been certified, and unfortunately the staff that is working on that's leading that, is still on family leave, but will be back on Wednesday. So we'd be happy to report the status of that later this week.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. Okay.
And then just the other thing I noted is obviously we're behind on a lot of the dates that we had promised, right, when we drafted the housing element before. And I haven't gotten into time to go into the next item on the agenda very much, the new housing element, but the new dates are all in that are, within our capacity, and HCD knows that because they've reviewed that with the new dates, I assume, right, in terms of being acceptable.
That's correct, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay.
Good question. Well, thank you so much for the report. We really appreciate it. I'm ready to make a motion. Anyone else?
Unless anyone else has questions?
I just have one quick, small little comment. It says on page 1304, it has, says in the notes section right under the table that things are supposed to be completed by February 2025, and considering that we are well past that date, if you could just reflect on that when you're doing your changes.
Thank you, Councilmember Wright. That is in the revised housing element, and that is one of our technical edits.
I didn't see it on the list that you put on the screen in front
It's
of
in our
us.
it's in our next presentation.
It's in item 7.
It's
We're on
next. It's
item
coming.
6.
Okay.
Did you have any other questions? No? Okay.
All right, I move to adopt the resolution approving the city's 2024 annual progress report on the implementation of the housing element of the general plan, the 2024 annual progress report on the implementation of other elements of the general plan, and directing the city manager to transmit the reports to the California Department of Housing and Community Development and the Governor's Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation.
Second, get it done.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
And for item number 6, with the motion made by Councilmember Beer and seconded by Councilmember Espinosa, the motion passes unanimously. And that's for item number 6 with the amendments or corrections as noted in the presentation.
Perfect. All right. That is item 6. We are moving on to item 7, the general plan amendment, GPA-106-24, for adoption of the revised 2023 to 2031 housing element of the general plan. File number 2023-025. Our presenters, well, we'll start with Community Development Director Samantha Updegrave, and I'm sure we'll have many other data points and extra input. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Beckmeyer, and good evening again. I'm Samantha Updegrave, Community Development Director, and I'm joined tonight for this presentation by Nicholas Hamilton and Aaron Acknan from Good City Company. We're really excited to be here tonight presenting these revisions to the housing element. The community and the city council have done a tremendous amount of work on this document over the past few years, and staff have been coordinating closely with Housing and Community Development, or HCD, to bring our housing element into substantial compliance with state law. So as you'll see in here in the presentation, HCD has determined that the revisions before you tonight will be in substantial compliance with state law, which opens the door for the certification of our housing element once we complete the required rezones. An adoption of these revisions is our critical next step toward gaining certification and the return of local control over how housing development projects are built within our community. So tonight we'll provide a brief overview of the housing element, a summary of the direction received from HCD, go over some technical revisions, and an added revised finding, which you should have on the dais with you, and conclude with staff's recommendation. And with that, I will turn it over to Nick with Good City.
Thank you, Director Updegrave. Thank you to the council, thank you to the Planning Commission, city staff, in virtually every department, and of course the community who have been active and engaged at every step throughout the housing element process. All of us at Good City Company are extraordinarily grateful for the opportunity to support the city throughout the development of the 2023-2031 housing element update. So thank you. Sorry. Managing two screens is maybe. Okay, thank you. Okay. So where are we now? The housing element kicked off formally in September of 2022, following the, sort of in conjunction with the completion of the general plan update. Clearly, there were some preliminary activities that happened before that informed the process, as well as initiatives throughout the county and throughout the Bay Area region that were supportive of the overall analysis. The first published draft was in the spring of 2023. We worked through comments that we received that summer. And the council, of course, adopted the housing element in January of 2024. The city received formal comments in March 29th of 2024, as well as significant guidance and discussion with HCD over the months between then and now. Very intensive revisions upon revisions. And in October, the city received the fair housing comments. And in the last couple of months, we have worked closely with HCD to finalize the remaining revisions that they wanted to see in order to get to a substantially compliant housing element. That brings us here today in March of 2025. Next, please. Thank you. So when the city kicked off the preparation of the housing element, there were multiple community engagement activities that informed and set the stage for the process, including community workshops and other fora. Key community concerns that came out of that process included affordability, that was really top of mind for people, crowding in existing units, infrastructure capacity was a concern, especially roads and sewer. Fire safety was a concern, including evacuations and challenges associated with the road infrastructure, as well as, and this is reflected in the general plan as well, a desire to concentrate increased density in sort of mixed-use walkable areas. And finally, environmental protection and difficult processes around project approvals were identified by the community. Significant changes in state housing law, have happened since the previous cycle of housing elements, notably the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, which we call RHNA, was 1,892 units over the 8-year planning period, of which we are a couple of years into. That's over 236 units a year, each year throughout the 6th cycle period. Next slide, please. So the housing element is structured, for those who are perhaps just joining the process. It starts out with the goals. Then there's a housing sites inventory, which looks at a specific set of sites and the capacity for housing on them. There's a fair housing plan, which is a very important part of the entire housing element. Below the goals come the policies and then the programs that will implement and make these changes. It's a plan for the changes that are necessary. And there are also ongoing policies that guide behavior and processes within the city. Extensive analysis was completed. Hundreds and hundreds of pages of analysis are completed and documented in several appendices. And yeah, they're all there in the agenda report. Next, please. The housing element is organized within 2 goals. Goal 1 is with respect to maintaining, improving, and developing housing, as well as encouraging the retention of housing. And we're looking at housing at all different variety of income levels, with priority given to households with low income. Goal 2 is about affirmatively furthering fair housing to ensure that all members of the community have equitable access to safe, sanitary, and affordable housing. Next slide, please. My colleague Sabina Mora was integral in leading the fair housing aspects of the preparation of this plan. At a glance, the site's inventory, the arena of 1,892 units, is reflected into, is here, and it is divided into different brackets of income affordability. With the buffer sites, there's a 36% overall buffer for sites overall. For low income, that's a 50% lower income buffer. These buffers may sound superfluous, but they're actually extraordinarily important to the overall integrity of the housing element, as well as the city's ability to retain control over land use decisions moving into the future. There are several phrases you may have heard, such as no net loss, and related ideas that are extremely important. Not so much in getting the housing element adopted, but what happens right thereafter and for the next multiple years. So these are extremely important part of the housing element. Next, please. So, again, within the Fair Housing Plan, some of the really critical aspects of that are housing mobility. So enhancing people's ability to live in those highest choice neighborhoods, and how can we create opportunity at every step of the income ladder within the neighborhoods that provide the highest amount of services and of access and all of the things that come along with living in what most people would say is a nice neighborhood, and several other policies. Next, please. The programs, there are 14. They start with the rezoning program, which you will hear much more about shortly. That's coming up on the agenda for the council, as well as overall citywide zoning modernization and streamlining, master planning for the public sites, district sites, city-owned sites, state-owned sites. Several programs associated with promoting housing and promoting fair housing, as well as bringing identified aspects of local processes and local municipal code in conformance with various state and federal regulations. Yes, please. Where are we now? Where are we now? We have a letter from HCD, a letter that is very helpful, and it provides a lot of clarity on potential directions forward. As Director Updegrave mentioned earlier, the letter says that the statutory requirements are fulfilled by the programs and the sites that are articulated within the housing element. So they've given us the gold star, the thumbs up on what is in the draft plan. The draft plan is consistent with the guidance that we received from HCD throughout the process, as well as a prior guidance given by the council in prior agenda items. Next, please. I would point out that the housing element cannot be formally certified until it is adopted again, and also the rezoning package in order to make the housing inventory sites have sufficient capacity as articulated in the housing element. That piece has to get done for the formal certification to come. Next. 2025, where are we now? What was revised, what was not? A significant amount of analysis was included to support the sites that really put additional analysis to back up those sites and really make those very solid. It didn't change the results of the inventory. We codified certain things in addition to what already was explained, and explained them yet further and provided more evidence for the sites that were already established and were already looked at by the council. Affirmatively furthering fair housing programs, especially housing mobility programs, got a lot of attention. Publicly owned sites, the state was very interested to see very specific actions for those, as well as a handful of technical revisions, which we'll review specifically in a moment. What was not changed? The inventory. What was not changed? The goals, the policies, the ongoing programs. The quantified objectives were also not changed, nor were the prior housing element review or housing resources. However, all of the other appendices received additional analysis. Next. For the sites, some of the analysis and program changes around the same set of sites included, some of the additional analysis to support potential redevelopment of non-vacant sites, infrastructure capacity, additional analysis as well as programs, additional analysis for pipeline projects, adding what we call a mid-cycle review, so kind of at the midpoint in the process, really looking holistically at the slate of programs as well as the progress that's been made, and firm commitments as the result of that mid-cycle review to look at additional sites if that's necessary and additional programs if that's necessary. Next, please. The fair housing piece, housing mobility, was extremely important, and so Program 4 is really greatly expanded. It was originally constructed as an ADU support program, but it has evolved into something broader, as well as additional changes related to supportive housing, SROs, emergency shelters, and some analysis on replacement versus preservation. It is very popular. It's very exciting to put a shovel in the ground to have a ribbon cutting, but it is very much more expensive per unit than maintaining and preserving an existing affordable unit. Reasonable accommodations, there's a specific set of changes around the findings related to reasonable accommodations that it receives attention, objective design standards as well as certain bike and ped and other prioritization of other public projects in order to advance what we call place-based strategies for people who are already living in the community. Next. For the public sites, there is interest in supports and for lot consolidation, as well as specific metrics associated with when certain actions would happen. Next, please. I'm trying to go quickly in the interest of time, but there is a lot of content, so I apologize. So I do want to. This first block, with respect to a technical edit that has been added in March, so that was not included in the prior published draft, but was included in the agenda packet and in the staff report, is a additional program language with respect to what we call shortfall sites, specifically for those associated with lower income arena, and those sites are and it is to create a by right process if at least 20% of the units are affordable to low income, then there will be a by right process, and it's specifically for the sites listed on the screen, which are 2, 11, 12, 16B, 18, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 27A, 27B, 28, 29, 32, 38, G, I, and J. And they will be rezoned that way. I do want to note that it was important to HCD that we codified that they would meet this requirement, but every one of these sites was already exceeding this requirement in the housing element as it was drafted and adopted in January, and so there's no material change to the sites list as a result of this. Table 5, I do need to read this, or I would like to propose reading this into the record, which is to revise the table note of Table 5. Thank you, Councilmember Wright, for identifying the error. It should be that programs indicated with the R, the rezoning programs, and all land use redesignation and rezoning to accommodate RENA are included within Program Housing Element Implementation Program 1 and are intended to be complete by May, not February of 2025. However, additional significant implementation activities will continue through December 2026. Another technical edit that was identified in the letter that was received from HCD recently was to make some findings associated with the non-vacant sites. And I believe, City Attorney's Office, do I need to read, would you like me to read this whole thing? Okay.
I don't think you need to read the whole thing.
Okay.
You need to discuss what they are.
Okay, thank you. So the additional findings show that the additional research that was added to support the inclusion of sites that are non-vacant sites that are slated for low-income, to fulfill low-income RENA. For those sites, there's site-by-site analysis has been included within particularly tables F11 and F12 within the Housing Element Appendix F, which is pages F40 and through F42. There's some columns off toward the right-hand side there that provide granular level data. And in other areas of that appendices, it explains the methodology and the evidence, the evidential basis for the conclusions that are drawn. Sites are only included on the list if they meet those criteria. And such as the physical characteristics and an idea called the improvement to land value as an index of the likelihood of redevelopment. Again, this was already in the housing element. This was already reflected in the analysis that was prepared and presented previously. However, we're making it very clear, or I would propose making it very clear through these findings that that such analysis has been completed and that you can make that finding. Next, please. With respect to environmental review, I think we'll also get to the actions, but the adopted initial study negative declaration from January 26, 2024, all of the changes that are proposed in the current draft are consistent, and there's not a significant change from what was from the environmental analysis that was already completed and adopted. And additional environmental review is not required. And a brief note, a targeted rezoning package and associated CEQA is sort of in a related lane, but it is distinct from this action and activity. And Samantha, I think, I'll do the timeline and I'll pass it back to you. So where are we now? We're here at this hearing, of course. What's been happening with respect to implementation? Staff has and public decisions have been made to begin on implementation of certain things, including the development of objective design standards, the emergency shelter ordinance, as well as initiating the targeted rezoning and general plan amendment process, which will, and I believe will come before you again here shortly. Upcoming are finalizing that slate of very important things in order to receive a certified housing element. Also important are various infrastructure improvements and and a housing element implementation plan that will address many of the other items that are included in the housing element in more specificity over the coming years. That's good. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So with that, the staff recommends that the council find the revisions consistent with the initial study negative declaration and that subsequent environmental review is not required, and to approve the revised 2023-2031 housing element of the general plan with the added findings, the technical edits to the housing implementation program, Program 1, Action 8, and the date correction on Table 5.
As explained by staff during its oral report tonight.
Yes. That was my next line. And with that, that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a lot.
Council, before questions and public comment, would you like to make a motion to extend the meeting?
I'm sure we would.
What did she say?
We need to extend the meeting.
Oh.
We need to make a motion.
I move we extend it to midnight.
I second. We have a motion and a second to extend the meeting to midnight.
Right now.
Please vote.
The motion made by Councilmember Bright and seconded by Mayor Beckmeyer to extend the meeting to midnight passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah.
All right, so you asked before about public comment. Just for the record, there are 3 cards in my hand for public comment on this item. I don't know how many on the phone, of course. And I wonder if there are initial questions out that we want to ask or clarify before that. Greg has one, Christine has one, or some. Go ahead.
I just want to start out by recognizing, having been an integral part of the process as I served on Planning Commission, that what planning staff has done here is a big lift. And the circumstances in which Community Development Department now has done it under were less than ideal. We lost our planning director, we lost a number of staff, yet they continued to work through a very difficult process, working with HCD, working with us on council, those on Planning Commission, and we're still able to pull it together without us getting in the kind of trouble that other communities have found themselves in where they've lost local control. And I just want to recognize the fact that they have worked very hard, and I very much appreciate their diligence and hard work.
Agreed.
It was strictly a comment.
It was a
I'm sorry.
comment, not a question. Okay, go ahead, Mayor
Sorry,
Pro Tem.
I'm just going to ask 1 or 2 now, partly because I know there's some public questions about this one, but yeah, I really appreciate Good City and all the work you've done coordinating with HCD. So HEI 1, that was your slide 20, I'm a little confused about. And that was.
Could you pull that back up, Ms. Coffey?
HEI 1.
Okay. So this is a lot of sites, and I don't have the map in my head. Is this related to the topic of we have a lot of sites that already have development on them, or right?
No, this is specific to sites that are listed for shortfall, and that would be rezoned in order to achieve a lower income RENA on those sites.
Okay, so I know one of those is the Sanchez Art Center. I don't know what all the others are, but were we rezoning the shortfall sites now as part of this process that we're doing now?
The January 2024 housing element already included rezoning each and every one of these sites to achieve this, and then more than this. This is a statutory threshold applicable to any site statewide that might fall into that category. In order to achieve the RENA, as the housing element outlines, kind of at a bigger level, these sites were already going to satisfy this requirement.
Okay.
And HCD insisted that the language go in, and so the language is going in. But it was the city was always on track to fulfill the requirement.
Okay, so even for Sanchez, we've zoned it. I zoned it for more than this number of units. Okay.
And all of these sites are included in the Phase 1 rezoning already as well.
Okay. I'm losing my train of thought. It's getting late. So the Planning Commission did these little maps, right, for a lot of the key sites, including that one. And I remember in meetings prior, watching the Planning Commission meetings, because we have not reviewed those maps really before, from my recollection, that the conditions that the Planning Commission was putting on those, so it's partly the boundary, but also adding setbacks, open space requirements, heights, and so forth. Staff was unsure at the time that putting all those conditions on those actually could still meet the number of units that we were trying to get. Has that been reviewed and analyzed, or is that part of the rezoning work that comes later?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mayor Pro Tem. The assessment of the objective design standards is part of the rezoning packet that's moving forward, and those are not included in the housing element.
But we are, in the housing element, we're identifying a certain number of units for each of these sites. So if those...
Based on the area devoted to housing. And those maps we have not made any changes to any of the maps, so they are currently part of the adopted housing element.
I can probably help you a little bit with that.
Okay, please do.
We did do the analysis in a meeting like this that went well past midnight, and we did do our best to calculate that it was feasible to do it within the height requirements and the amount of area that we provided them for it. So it should be a much smoother process for the rezoning that should be forthcoming shortly.
Okay. Okay, I can wait till after public comment. Oh, wait, sorry, I do have one more. Yeah, this finding that I'm just now reading that was added, because I think I noticed that something was missing. So, and again, I don't know which sites this applies to, so maybe you can clarify, but finds based on substantial evidence in the record, existing uses on the non-vacant sites identified in the site inventory to accommodate RENA are likely to be discontinued during the planning period and therefore do not constitute an impediment to planned residential development.
Where's that?
That's the red line of the, that was on a piece of paper that was left on our,
Okay, yeah.
on our tables.
Thank you.
So I need to know which sites these are before I can say that. I mean,
Would it be possible for us to put a map up and have us look at those sites, since not everyone has a printed packet?
Sure, I think.
Here it is.
We can look for the page on the packet and see if we
Okay.
can pull that up.
That would be helpful.
I will note that the analysis supporting these findings is already located within the housing element itself. So this is not based on new information. HCD asked us to include these findings tonight. So that's why they've been added, but they are reflective of the analysis, as Mr. Hamilton was saying, that's in the housing element itself.
and this is Appendix F it talks about. Is that correct? I have not read Appendix F, so I'm at a disadvantage here. So,
Yes, the changes to the finding, the change is not to the development standards that are, such as the density or the units that are anticipated for any of those sites. Those stand as they stood in January 2024. The change here is to make a finding that says that analysis is in the record. It's to reinforce what has already been done.
okay. Can you tell? I mean, is the Sanchez Art Center in this list of sites, and can you explain to us what is in the record that says that the Sanchez Art Center uses are not an impediment?
Yes, we can. Give me one. Give us a moment.
And I think too, it's important to remember that the polygons also account for some of the existing development that's on the site, and locate areas for housing development within, within specific locations on the site.
But unfortunately, that one, and like it cuts through the Mildred Owens Concert Hall, the polygon.
It looks like Assistant City Attorney Murphy has joined us. Were you jumping in?
Yes, thank you. I just also wanted to note for the record that the finding is technically not legally required in the resolution. It's only required per the government code if more than 50% of the low-income sites are not vacant. But since HCD did ask us to include the finding, and since the information was already in the record in the text of the housing element, we did include it, but we did also include, as you'll see, a finding that more than 50% of the low income is on non-vacant sites, just to clarify that for the record.
And just for the record, that is Karen Murphy, who is an assistant city attorney for, from my office.
I can jump in. On packet page 1,565, which is table F12. I don't know if it's easy for us to share something like that. Not really. Thank you. So it's perfect. So right in the middle of the screen is the Sanchez Art Center. It was the Art Center, Council. Okay. So the Sanchez Art Center, which is Site 23, is a publicly owned site owned by the city, and so indeed the way that the state identifies whether or not that site is constrained. For a site that is owned by the city, you actually have quite a bit more latitude than you would have for a site that was privately owned, because it belongs to you. So you decide what happens to it. And so I think that there's so there's not that granular level, because it's not necessary, because it's not a privately owned site, it's a publicly owned site, owned by the city.
Go ahead.
No, are we saying this finding for this site, that the existing uses aren't an impediment? I guess that's my question.
That the existing uses are not an impediment to the number of units that are listed on the housing element. Okay. So, the methodology for this site, like many of the sites, does not assume that the entire site is wall to wall an apartment block. It assumes that it's a specific amount of the park, in this case of the site, in this case 4 acres out of the 8.84 acres. So it assumes that the other 4.8 acres are reserved for other purposes that are not the housing units that are included on the housing inventory.
Okay, and then are the 2 school district sites also part of this?
Terra Nova and Oceana, is that what you're talking about? Mm-hmm. Which is 2 school districts?
Yes, Terra Nova and Oceana.
Those are the 2 that are identified, yes.
Yes, and so that's on packet page 1,563 toward the bottom, and those are sites number 21 and 22, Oceana High School and Terra Nova High School, and yes, indeed, that site level analysis is included for each of these 2 sites. That there are not structures basically that are newer than 1993. It meets that criteria, that if there are structures, there's either no structure or it's what was single story, that the lot coverage is less than 50%, and that no demolition of a structure would be required for the areas indicated in order to achieve this capacity. The size of the site is important. These are both also large areas, 5.5 and 4 acres respectively. There is no improvement to land value due to the nature of a public facility, and yeah, and that's yes.
Okay.
So it meets the criteria. That combined with rezoning the finding would be that yes, this would be likely to redevelop, or that there isn't a reason why it would be unlikely to redevelop.
Well, and I guess that's where my question is. I mean, yeah, the finding doesn't talk about structures so much as existing uses, and obviously the school districts has written letters that they're not interested, right? And so, I mean, is that factored in, or it doesn't need to be?
Sure. Like all sites that are owned as real property, we don't have perfect information or a window into the mind of the individual or institution that makes that decision ultimately on what they will do with that land moving forward. What the city has is land use authority, and that is a prerogative within the city that it can exercise to proactively establish a vision and a plan and regulations around what may or may not be possible. And in fact, that can influence the value and potential decisions of that institution or individual. In this case, we're speaking of another public agency, a school district. And so we don't have perfect information or knowledge on the future, but what the city does have is land use control.
Okay, thank you.
Greg?
Oh, sorry.
No problem. I do have a couple of quick process-oriented questions for you. What happens if we change this document at all?
Yeah.
Well, it would, changes would have to go back to Housing and Community Development for additional review. So that would likely add considerable amount of time. You know, I think we're at a point where, you know, we want to be making, you know, we want HCD to see that we're making progress and making a good faith effort, you know, to get ourselves toward certification. It could also delay the rezoning. The housing element revisions must be adopted prior to certification of the EIR and adoption of the targeted general plan amendments and rezoning. So that could have a considerable impact.
And I think we have Karen Murphy who would like to add something to that discussion.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to reiterate the points made by Director Updegrave that we would have to, at this point, take any changes back to HCD because HCD did review and issue their letter based on what was sent to them. So if there were revisions made, we would have to resubmit it to HCD, determine whether that affected their decisions, and then go through the process in order to, you know, see if we would get this same letter from HCD.
And obviously that would just create more delay.
And another one of those real super simple questions, what would the potential consequences be?
The potential consequence is that we continue to not have local control over land use decisions. So we would be vulnerable to more builder's remedy applications. You know, additionally, you know, HCD could use their enforcement authority, which could include, you know, legal action, referral to the Attorney General, fines or monetary penalties, loss of, you know, like what we've seen in San Francisco, where they've lost even more local control over certain things. So those are the kind of consequences.
And I would also add that we could also be vulnerable to third-party suits, and in addition, without a certified housing element, there are certain grants that the city is not eligible for. So, one of the reasons that, we've been trying to move forward as quickly as possible to get the housing element in place, and then also move forward with the rezoning.
Mm-hmm.
That was it, pre-public comment?
Well, then, unless you have anything else, we'll have public comment? Yeah? Myra? Okay, public comment. Let's open public comment. And some of the folks who had formerly put in cards might be on the phone, or they might not be able to comment. I had a card from Andrew Leone. I saw him leave 2 hours ago. I have Cindy Abbott and Sue Degree.
Andrew might be on Zoom.
And we'll see if we have anyone on the phone.
And I brought something for everybody, so I'll give it to Sarah, and Sarah, there's extra copies for the record, too. Thank you.
Thank you.
So good evening. It's still nighttime. Mayor Beckmeyer, council members, staff, and the few public that are left. I'm Cindy Abbott, and I'm speaking this evening as the executive director of Sanchez Art Center. Yesterday, we closed a trio of exhibitions. One of them celebrated the award winners of the annual Pacific Coast Fog Fest photography contest. Another showed the work of over 50 members of the Art Guild of Pacifica, an organization that's been in existence as long as the city has and has over 200 members from throughout the San Francisco Peninsula and over to the East Bay. And we had an incredibly poignant show by African-American artist William Rhodes. William's work is in the Smithsonian Institute, their permanent collection. And I'm delighted to report that through the exhibition at Sanchez Art Center, a piece of William's work was also acquired by the Crocker Art Museum in Sacramento for their permanent collection. Next up is the Left Coast Annual that brings visibility to Pacifica with artists applying for this juried show from throughout California, Oregon, Washington, Alaska, and Hawaii. We've also just opened the call for the annual 50/50 show. In our 17th year, the exhibition is known and cherished by artists throughout California. That exhibition alone brings over 1,200 visitors to Pacifica each year. I'll also note that on Saturday night, our Neighbor in Pacifica performances packed the concert hall pretty much to capacity with a performance by blues legend Maria Muldaur. I'm sharing this as the Pacifica Center for Arts is today and has been for over 25 years a vibrant part of our community, bringing visibility to the city throughout the greater San Francisco Bay Area and beyond. I'm here to ensure that you know that the property is much more than Site 23, grouped together with 19 additional nameless locations that are on a list to be rezoned to accommodate a shortfall in the RHNA numbers. I'm here to ensure that you know that the property was purchased by the city, which is what I've just handed you as a reminder, purchased by the city for use as a recreational and cultural center, dedicated as such by this body, the Pacifica City Council, in 1998. At Sanchez Art Center, we recognize the dire need for low-income housing in the city. Any consideration of the property being converted to housing, however, must be done with full disclosure to the community and ample discussion to ensure the continuance of the campus as both a recreational and cultural center, not by right to a developer who has no history or understanding of the community asset. We hope you'll reconsider and remove Site 23 from the list at this time. We recognize future needs may necessitate changes, but being grouped together with a discussion, without discussion of the value of arts and cultures to the community, particularly at this time when museums, libraries, and institutions of culture and learning are being eliminated, is not the time for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Sue, please go ahead.
Yeah, the Sanchez Art Center is just one example, but an extremely fundamental and important one because of the revenue that it can bring and does bring into our city. And we're talking about tourism and destination in the next one. It's essential to revenue, and what we need is revenue. So I'm not convinced yet that this housing element, I'm very appreciative of the report. I was beginning to be a little bit more understanding and comfortable with it. I come from a background of truly affordable housing, definitely for that. Something I did see that I want to look up on is some statement of removing wraparound services for the disabled kind of alarmed me. I mean, I think I read that wrong. But it bothers me, the whole premise of being forced to have the RENA numbers with a punishment of by rights, developer rights, mind the way. Now, when I sat up there for 16 years, it was the developers who stood in the way of getting truly affordable housing. So this is like a slap in the face. And so where do you, those of you who have discretionary powers, where do you stand up for the local person's voice, the public at large, in what's going on in our city? It bothers me that the legislatures in Sacramento seem to want to punish people when in our own city, we know the history is we've always been for of truly affordable. And so to even just say developer rights without saying, hey, truly affordable developers, you have the experience, you know how to do it, work with the city to get truly affordable housing. Okay, that makes some sense. Do any developers need help with funding? Yes, I get that. They do. You can't just wish it. Do we talk about that? That needs to be talked about. So I'm concerned that we need to stand up to anybody, elected or whatever, be above us, that takes away the public's right to be part of the democratic process. That's in our Constitution. Do I understand you're kind of stuck tonight with having to do something so we're going to lose everything? I understand that understanding. But I think you can be vocal at the same time as following, keeping those protections for us in the meantime. And I know a lot of other cities are screeching. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you. I don't have any other cards. Are there folks on the Zoom call?
There are two. There are two raised hands. The first is for Andrew Leone.
Andrew, thank you for calling in. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Beckmeyer, council members, and whoever may be still listening tonight. My name is Andrew Leone, and speaking to you as a founding member of the Sanchez Art Center. In October 1996, when City Council was trying to decide whether or not to enter into a lease with the Art Guild of Pacifica and several dozen local artists, I was invited to sit at the staff table to answer questions council members might have had. We made a lot of big promises. New tar and gravel roofing for all of the buildings on the site, repairs to the broken windows, doors, floors, and a myriad other repairs, as well as always providing ongoing maintenance to the buildings. Also providing the community with free art exhibits, rotating every month or so, and on and on. Understandably, some council members were skeptical. The building was in very bad shape, and yet they took a chance and we moved in November 1996. I was a director for the first 5 years, and even though I wasn't an experienced administrator, we kept every promise and then some. We raised hundreds of thousands of dollars from grants and donations and redid all the roofs. I can't count the number of work parties, numbers of community participants, or calculate the sweat equity put into this project, but it's huge and continues to this day. We had one of the enormous roofs redone again recently. People sometimes forget how surprising and unexpected this blossoming of art, music, and culture in Pacifica actually was. There were big articles in the San Francisco Chronicle, news coverage from around the Bay Area. We were visited by official delegations from other cities asking, how did Pacifica, not the wealthiest of cities, how were we able to pull this off? When I told them about all the lucky breaks, including how the city purchased the property for an amount far below market value in return for keeping it recreational and cultural use, how the city took a chance, how the artists and community members rose up, the grants, etc., these delegations from Gilroy and other places, they just shook their heads and said, what you are describing is practically a miracle. And it is not replicable. And that is the message I have for you right now. The blossoming of this community arts project is a miracle. It can't happen again. And there won't be anything close to it in this town probably ever. The center grew organically from Pacificans and fits this town perfectly. We are known throughout the region. I just want to say we shouldn't even be confronted with this Sophie's choice. This is a gem, and we shouldn't mess with it. It's a beautiful thing. That's all I have to say right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next raised hand is for Peter Loeb.
Please go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for having this Zoom option, because there's no way at what I call my advanced age I could have sat there for the last 4.5 hours. But thank you for being there. I'm a longtime board member of the Sanchez Arts Center. I'm also a member of the Pacifica Performances and have been a performer at the Mildred Owen Concert Hall. Those two entities are the major cultural assets of this city. And I just object to the notion that that a developer could come along and buy right. In other words, without any discretionary review, could propose to build housing on that site. And that's the end of the Sanchez Arts Center and the Mildred Owen Concert Hall. I agree with everything that Sue DeGree was just saying. I understand that the council is between a rock and a hard place. You pretty much have to do what's being asked of you to do, but I really want to object to it, to the process, and I wish the council would at least, if I was on the council, what I was saying earlier to some people, I would argue for telling HCD that what they are asking Pacifica to do, to eliminate an art center and a concert hall just to satisfy a regional housing needs assessment arbitrary number, that it doesn't take into account local values, local cultural assets. It's just, I am just horrified that the art center and the concert hall are on the chopping block to be, replaced by housing just because of some annoying bureaucratic crap. I'm sorry, it's just baloney that the whole. I'm so frustrated with this, but I share what Sue DeGree was saying, that this we're trying to meet some kind of regional housing needs assessment number that it has no relationship to what's of value in Pacifica. We have no way of saying, look, we want to preserve these institutions that people have paid in blood, sweat, and tears to develop here, and they belong here. I'm just standing up to speak up for the Sanchez Art Center and the Concert Hall. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
There are no other raised hands.
Thank you. I'll close public comment and bring this back to the council. And I have a light from Councilmember Beer.
So someone needs to explain to me, because I think I'm missing something. Because where does it say anywhere that we would be getting rid of the art center? So I just don't understand where it says that or why any of us would agree to that ever. So I'm curious about the by rights. I think I need an explanation. I think the community needs an explanation. And we obviously love the Sanchez Art Center, and it wouldn't be Pacifica without it. So, yeah.
In the course of that explanation, it would be helpful if you could explain how by rights relates to having an approved housing element or not, in regard to local control.
Got it. And thank you and good evening. Aaron Ackman with Good City Company. I think the key component on this site is that it's a publicly owned site. So although there shows to 40 units an acre in the housing element, it's about in almost a 9-acre site. What's different about this site versus a private site is that you will still go through a request for proposal process, where if you were to put this out to the development community, where you would lay out the vision for this site, which obviously at this point would be retention of the art center there, based on council member feedback and the public feedback. So that's different than a privately owned site, by right site, where they could go out and find their own developer and bring it in, and you would have limited discretion as a city. You get that extra step as a public agency when you own the land to go through a process where you develop that vision and you're able to take that to the community, have council members, have council meetings where that's discussed. So I would say, secondly, this site was purposely underzoned in a way in that if you take a look at this at 9 acres, 40 units an acre, that's 360 units. What you have here is about 130 units on 4 acres. So it's even less than that 40 unit per acre max. So this was all designed because of what we heard from the public, what we've heard from the Planning Commission, what we heard from the council, to take into consideration retention of the art center here while still being able to build out the number of units that's specified within the housing element.
So are you talking that we can have the units and also have the art center to stay there?
That's right, yeah. So there's 9 acres here. The table shows building on about 4 acres at 40 units an acre. So what you would have to do is lay out in detail in this RFP what your city's vision is. Then you would put that out to the development community, maybe the affordable housing development community, and they would have to build around that. One example, it's a little bit different, but I worked in a different city where I was planning director. We had a site that was city-owned. The council's vision was to have senior affordable on top and a daycare center on the bottom. We laid that in detail in the RFP, and that was the selection criteria in which we chose the developer. And today in that city, there's senior affordable housing with daycare, and the developers that didn't propose to that, they didn't make it through the screening criteria. So you will have that extra step of discretion, and I based on this conversation tonight, I know that you'll use it.
And that was the process we went through at the Planning Commission. That is why we zoned it for 40 units an acre. We were contemplating vertical addition and to maintain pretty much the same square footage for the art center and maintain the performance space at the same time.
And the playing fields, too.
Pardon?
And the playing fields were carved out to be protected,
The playing
too.
fields were also part of that discussion. That's correct.
May I just add one more point, too, is that the housing element does say that the redevelopment would incorporate, any redevelopment would incorporate the art center.
Can you tell us where it says that?
Yeah, it's packet page 451.
And we still have the right to condition
Correct.
these projects any way we want, and frankly, we own the land, we can do whatever the heck we want.
That's correct, Councilmember Wright.
Could you just back up and explain, like, what is HCD expecting of us, you know, all the different policies that we've said we were going to do with publicly owned sites? I mean, like, would they be forcing us to go through a Surplus Land Act process? You know, what are the steps that we're committing to doing? And then I'm concerned that that might open up, you know.
So what the housing element articulates are several sort of proactive steps to move it forward into a process that could end up in an RFP that could get at development proposals for the vision that you would articulate. But before you can do any of that, the first step would be to conduct what you might call a fit study, to work with either a developer or a highly qualified consultant to understand the real development potential, understand what's realistic, at a more granular level than what the housing element is doing for all of its sites. So just sort of a stepping stone toward building up enough information to decide, yes, we want to go put an RFP together, and what are the options underneath the Surplus Lands Act, which actually has multiple different pathways you might follow, and it's not clear. You want to make that decision based on the best possible evidence and analyze that in a greater depth than it currently is on the table. And so those would be some of the initial steps, is to analyze the development potential, what's really realistic.
So we don't have to just, you know, put it out for surplus lands and then, oh, look, we have this low-income housing developer who wants to build 300 units there and necessarily have to accept that.
There's steps that you want to put in place, moving inchwise to make sure that, you know, once you're more committed, you're far more aligned with what your vision for that site would be, lock yourself in.
Okay, and then this is a surplus site, right? So it's not one of our core sites. So, I mean. So are there still steps that we have to do, is my question, or do we just wait to see how other things are?
Yes, you are committing to doing those steps for this site.
So we are committing to doing those steps now.
But with the first step being a study and understand the development potential of the site.
Okay.
But the table is set to have our cake and eat it too. If it did need to become developed, that we could still maintain the art center there and still have the performance studio. There's sufficient space there for that.
Following on to Mayor Pro Tem's questions, how much does a study like that cost? It's okay, you can give me a range.
I don't know offhand, but it's not, you know, you're not designing, it's not engineered drawing, so it's not super expensive, but it's still a considerable amount of money.
And it would be funded by the city?
That's right.
The government in Sacramento is not giving us money to have that study or compelling us to do it?
Well, they're compelling you to do it, but they're not necessarily have a funding source. I'm sure there's some grants out there, but there's not one that they're handing to you as part of this.
I see.
Is it less than 100,000, less than 50,000?
I feel like that's where push went.
I wouldn't want to guess and get it wrong, but.
And then
And if I can chime in, I mean, this is why we have our Housing in Lieu Fund and our Housing Action Fund related to starting development of housing.
with regard to environmental considerations, there's a major creek that runs right beside that site, and we don't know what the buffers are, and that's never been studied. As our director of our art center pointed out, it wasn't ever designed for housing, so that hasn't been looked at. What are the limitations or obligations for a city with a site like this when none of that has been factored in?
I mean, to answer your question, Mayor Beckmeyer, I think all of that would have to be part of the study itself. I do also want to note that this site is already in that adopted housing element. And so this has not been a change to the adopted housing. This site has not been added to the inventory list, so it is currently included in the adopted housing element.
But what changed with regard to this amendment is?
The changes with the amendment are clarifying that these sites will be rezoned in a certain manner, so like requiring minimum densities, allowing by right development for projects that meet certain affordability thresholds. But this site was already slated to be rezoned, and the rezone, I believe, is even more intensive than what the amendment to the implementation calls for. And I see that Assistant City Attorney Murphy has also come on.
Please go ahead.
Yes, and I'd also like to add that the by right approval language that was added was basically just adding requirements in state law, because all of the low income sites have to include the by right language if more or if at least 20% of the housing on the sites is low income. But as Mr. Ackman mentioned, the city does have control over the site. So the impacts of that are different than a privately owned site, because the city basically, controls what will ultimately be developed on the site, and through the fit study and through the analysis that needs to get done before we would even start thinking about, any surplus lands issues. So, so that does differentiate the by right from a private site.
And so what, outside of the housing element, what can we do, what can we put in place to make sure that it's protected? And that's obviously outside of the discussion tonight, but is there something that we can do to make sure that the art center is protected? And I don't know who I'm asking. Anyone who wants to answer.
I would say that we would need to think about something. I'm sure that there is something that we could have the council commit to at this moment. But remember, it's only in place for as long as the council wants it in place. So any council can change it. But in terms of, this is a requirement that HCD is imposing on the city.
Yeah.
So in terms of future city desires on how it wants to control that property, I'm sure we could, have the council take some action to show what its intent is. But once again, that intent could be changed by any future council.
Well, that's okay.
Could I mention an example that we have right here in Pacifica, being Sharp Park itself, and that is a deed-restricted piece of public property that was given to the city that is only allowable for certain uses? I'm sure we could think of some way to do something similar.
Well, I don't know how much we can restrict it if we're saying it's for a certain amount of housing, though. I mean, we could say the buildings somehow
We
have
can
to
do
be
both.
protected and built over, but the by right still bothers me, because, I mean, that means that there's no public process for reviewing the project, right?
On a publicly owned site, there is public process in the Surplus Lands Act, in the RFP, there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of other public process
The
happening.
RFP,
But not to review the final design.
the RFP would give us,
I believe, oh, go ahead. Assistant
Yeah,
City Attorney.
I can jump in. One other thing I did want to note is that some of the policies in the housing element do provide that flexibility for the city to look at different options as the city proceeds with the fit study. It does include language, for example, that that during that study that staff will present a menu of options for potential development to the council, and that the council has the ability to determine the process and would also be able to determine the process through a notice of availability and if this did move forward through any transfer of the property, the city would be able to, exercise some control as to what was ultimately constructed there. So it really is the fact that the city owns the land that does provide, some controls moving forward.
If they're rebuilding on the portion of the lot that has the buildings, which is how the polygon is divided up now, they're going to have to tear down the buildings to be able to build something new and higher. So who would be responsible for paying for that rebuild if we're rebuilding those spaces? That's not necessarily part of the housing developers, or we could make it and then nobody would ever really do the project because that would just be too expensive.
And does it have to go on top of the building? I understand there's playing fields, but there's playing fields in other places too. Like, can we build somewhere else other than on top of the building?
If I may, it would be part of the visioning process for the site, for the council to establish what the vision is: art center, affordable housing, playing fields, and then that would go through the process. But those would be the needs that are identified, and others can chime in on what the actual, housing element requirement aspect of that is. But it's like it's like the project that was mentioned earlier where you had senior housing and childcare. That was the vision of the city council, and developers were sought and screened to build it that way. So if on this site the vision were art studios and art center space and performance center space and affordable housing and playing fields, that's what would be envisioned, scoped out, and taken through the process.
I asked a question along this line once before in a related situation, and I'm wondering, is there, in an RFP like you were mentioning, you're talking about the building. You had a vision of what the building would be, but can you specify, could we, the city, specify affordable housing for artists? Can you specify for whom the affordable housing is being built? I know there's veterans places, right?
That's okay. You can specify. So in the other example I gave, we specified senior housing. Mm-hmm. What I don't know offhand, if artists are, you could do it in that way. That would be something we have to further research. But you do, to the city manager's point, you do have a lot of discretion in these RFP processes to lay out your vision. Even architecture, within ones I've been a part of, they lay out their vision of what they want the building to look like from an architectural standpoint. Mm-hmm. And that becomes one of the screening criteria or scoring criteria in which you choose your developer. So I would have to look on the actual artist units, but you have a lot of discretion through an RFP process to lay out your vision.
And I will just add, and Assistant City Attorney Karen Murphy kept reciting it, and our Community Development Director as well. The most important thing for the council to remember is that the council controls this site.
Right.
That provides so much more discretion on this particular site, more than any other sites that are not controlled by the city, because we will design what we want for that site. We in our RFP, to Vice Mayor Pro Tem's Bowles' question about who's going to pay for this, well, we control it. We can identify who we want to pay for it, the developer, but then that process is going to go through negotiations at that time to determine, well, how does it pencil out for the developer? Is there any assistance the city can provide for affordable housing? That's all part of the process that's going to happen once the RFP is issued, and then discussions begin. But the fact that the council has control over the site provides the council with a lot more discretion than any of the other sites that we are designating in the housing element.
Oh, Greg,
My
please go ahead.
My ultimate vision, if I was divinely inspired, is I would love to have both. I would love to have like a live-work unit where you have an artist space down below with an affordable artist living space above it, and then 2 more floors of, shall we say, market rate housing to finance the project. That would be something we could put in an RFP that would give us both affordable housing, artist space, or performance space, and have a developer pay for the whole thing.
And if I could, I just want to make sure we don't get too far away. We're designing a project now,
We're
envisioning, that's not what's on
designing.
the agenda, so
Okay,
stay focused
Just
on
one
the
more.
housing.
Bringing it back.
related to that. So we had a pretty big buffer. I mean, is there any chance that we could take it out? We'll just ask that question. Now, would that be too controversial to have to go back to HCD?
If we remove any sites, it would need to go back to HCD for further review.
And planning.
And, correct.
And the
then,
planning
and
department.
as well as the planning commission and back to
I
council.
mean, commission.
But if we move forward, can we later on decide what are we going to put in there?
That's
It-
what you're saying.
That's correct.
Are we done with that topic? Can I ask another
Please
question?
go. Yes.
Could you just lay out what in terms of real dollars, what the affordable levels are?
Yeah. We'll need to look that up. That's based on regional
Percentage of
data.
income?
But it means generally based on a percentage of the average median income.
But this is San Mateo County, so that's a kind of high number.
Yes, so we can pull that information out.
While you're looking at that, can I just ask for some new dates on HEI 11 and HEI 12? Because they seem to relate to some things happening in town right now, so want to know how much longer we're delaying this work by.
Is there a packet page related to that?
No, because I
Or
never
is that
got
the
to read it.
amendment?
I asked the question in relation to the update. I never got to read the housing element, so.
Oops.
Could you
I don't
repeat
have that
the question, please, Mayor Pro Tem?
HEI 11 and HEI 12. So both of those were supposed to have actions, started either earlier 2024 or now, and I'm just curious what the dates are, because and if you can point me to a packet page, that would be helpful too.
Okay, I will find that.
Yeah, I can't stay much longer, guys.
If I can jump in to answer the question on affordability in the interim. So the 2024 numbers, for example, for low would be up to 80% of the area median income. The area median income for the HUD-defined area here is $186,000 a year for a household of 4. So for 80% AMI, which would be the upper income level for a household of 4, would be a household income level of $156,650.
Sounds to me like all of Pacifica is pretty much affordable.
So,
Yeah.
Okay.
So an
HEI question.
Yeah, HEI 12, if you can get to that, I think this ties into the process for offering low-income units for sale. And we talked before that 801 Fassler has not had certificates of occupancy yet, but they're already listing units for sale. And so I think our policies now are starting late, but, you know, what is the policy for advertising these to low-income tenants, and, you know, how to get the word out so that it's a fair process?
So your question is about 801 Fassler?
Yeah, and just the programs for selling affordable units and marketing affordable units, which is AGI 12.
I'm still looking for the page number, I'm sorry.
Is 801 Fassler one of the sites?
No, it's one that's under construction now,
Fair housing marketing.
on the left side as you're driving out.
It's 11:54. While Director Upgrave is looking for that, shall we make a motion to extend?
Yep.
I can't stay much longer. I'm traveling tomorrow, and I need to pack still. So how much?
Okay.
What else is on the agenda that, and do we have to do those two things?
We have a budget update, and we have a bid. The bid, we need to do.
Yeah,
Because of
we actually
deadlines.
need to do both items, but we don't need to take long on them.
But we don't need to take long, right? And Mayor Pro Tem, if you need to go, you can go.
Oh, that's
There's
true.
4 of us here.
Okay, maybe
I
we'll
mean,
do that.
Myra's all, what the heck? I just saw her face. I know,
We all do.
I know, I do too.
Shall we do a test vote? I'll make a motion, we follow staff's recommendations.
I don't know that the city attorney condones test votes.
Okay.
move they
then
It's either a
extend the
vote
meeting
then
to
it's a formal
12:30.
motion.
How about that?
Moving, okay, we can do that one. I'll second that. So we're going to move city clerk Coffey
Have the motion
extend
to extend to 12:30 made by Mayor Pro Tem Bowles and seconded by Mayor Beckmeyer.
Please vote.
That vote passes unanimously.
Okay. HEI.
If I understand the question correctly, I'm sorry, I was multitasking to try to answer the other question as well. There are several affirmative marketing strategies, and one of the important ones is reaching out to families in schools that are identified as having low-income households about opportunities that would be here, that would be within some of the higher resource areas, and so really facilitating some of the housing mobility and reaching out to families that could benefit from it greatly is an important part of this program.
Another question is, it's going to be for the Pacifican?
Yes,
100%?
there are other outreach efforts for that, but there's a particular one that's in here that is about really trying to foster economic mobility as well, both.
Thank you.
But in terms of timeline, we're not looking at anything before June or next year, I guess, for these policies.
There is an
and
ambitious slate of programs that are very ambitious and that will require capacity that the city has already committed to with the January housing element adoption. And there are additional implementation actions in this draft that are will require even more capacity to implement and quickly, yes.
And then the other ones were HEI 11, which are really about tenant protections, which, again, are super helpful right now. And I mean, this is part of where I just reading these policies again in the implementation report, I mean, it's just good for us to be aware of and good for code enforcement to be aware of, right? Because we're making changes to policies, but but we're not doing it yet, right, when it's needed in our community. So, okay, I can follow up on those later.
All right, Greg. We're ready. Aren't we? Any more questions?
I don't have any more energy, so, yeah.
Then-
Oh, Greg.
Then I would move that we approve according to staff's recommendations.
I second. Did you get that, City Clerk Coffee?
Yes, I have the motion by Councilmember Wright and the second by Mayor Beckmeyer.
Please vote.
And with the motion made by Councilmember Wright to approve item number 7 as amended in the staff report and oral presentation, seconded by Mayor Beckmeyer, the vote passes unanimously.
Thank you, everyone. That's painful, and I hate it. Can we move on to, no.
2 more items.
We have 2 more items, and we need to say bon voyage to Mayor Pro Tem, except for I don't know how to say it in Norwegian. So we're going to turn our attention to item 8.
Is it a Brown Act violation to send us lots of pictures? Send us lots of pictures.
As long as we send them to public comment and post them all over town, I think it's okay, right? You can send them to.
Save my communications for next time.
Thank you. Have a safe trip.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good city. Thank you. Community development.
Thank you.
Okay.
Item 8.
And we're going to do item 8 and then item 10.
Okay, go.
Item 8. A public meeting to receive testimony regarding the establishment of the 1994 Business Improvement District, the Pacifica Tourism Marketing District. Assistant City Manager Yulia Carter is here for the presentation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the good news, I don't have a PowerPoint for this, so it's going to be very, very quick.
Yes.
So we just continue our process information of the new district. And you may recall that at the last council meeting on March 10th, City Council adopted resolution of intent to form the district to replace the current BID. So the City Councils also recommended that staff coordinates an in-person meeting with BID board members to share some financial analysis that we presented at the council meeting to discuss assessment methodology and parameters for the district before the council holds the public hearing on April 28th. So we did exactly that. So we had the board meeting scheduled and held just this last Friday. We discussed district parameters and assessment structure with the board. And after discussion, the board recommended a percentage-based assessment structure to set initial assessment at 0.5% instead of 1% was what was originally recommended. So tonight, we are not asking you to take any actions other than public comment. Again, it's a procedural requirement. So we ask you to open public comment, receive any public testimony if there are any, and on the formation of the district. And after today's meeting, we will return back on April 28th with the public hearing for more discussion and your action.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to go right to public comment. I have one card from Sue Degree.
So we're on 8, right?
Correct.
Okay, so yeah, so we don't want all our eggs in one basket, so I think it's really exciting that we do continue to look for tourism and ourselves as a destination to create revenue. Actually, it's a lot faster than waiting for building and things like that. So as we mentioned already numerous times, the Sanchez Art Center and the Performance Arts, those folks are all very valuable. And the coalition, they're there for ready to be a coalition, is like the Pacific Historical Society, the Sanchez Art, the performances. All of those are really important And along with that, I would encourage you to help the moving of the historic, can't speak tonight, car 1409. So it seems very expensive to have to move it from here to here on the same property. So if somebody could look into that, that seems very strange. I understand that it's not a fee by the Coastal Commission, but it's more of something in-house. But anyway, I'm very happy to see movement and encourage movement on connecting and talking to all of our already assets. We have trails that are wonderful thanks to the work of the open space and many other community efforts. We just have unique terrain around here, the ocean, the hills, and the culture and the history. There's nowhere else. And we could, I like this concerted effort to work to get revenue going in a richer, more ways. And I think the hotels really need it because ADUs are a competition, or whatever the word is for the other ones. And having these kind of things happening in the middle of the week would also help them to get people coming into the hotels earlier and staying through the whole weekend. So really appreciate it. Looks good.
Thank you very much. Assistant City Clerk? Anyone on the phone?
No.
All right, then I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to the council. There's no action needed for this item, but we'll be hearing back from you on the 28th of April. Is that correct?
With the public hearing, yeah.
Very good. Anything else, council?
Just thank you for having an in-person meeting with all those folks. I think it was a
really helped.
really good idea.
It made a big difference. They were
Yeah.
very happy, huh?
It was very hard to get these people out of $1.
Yeah. But they didn't mind not being on a Zoom.
Thank you so much, Yulia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item 10, we have the mid-year budget review and adoption of a resolution to adjust the fiscal year 2024-25 budget. And we have our Assistant City Manager, Yulia Carter, and Director of Finance and Administrative Services, Marisol Gomez.
Thank you very much. Again, we will try to be very brief on this. It's our routine annual review of the mid-year review of the budget that's before you today. Here's the agenda, but again, we are not going to go through this. We can go to the next slide. And go straight to the summary. What you see here is essentially a snapshot of the where we are in the budget in the current fiscal year. And you can see the percentages, probably easier to digest. It's really minor change from the adopted budget, which is exactly what we want to see at mid-year budget review. So this is all positive news, like no news, no big changes. Is exactly what we want to see in the mid-year. So revenues are up by 0.4%, the expenditures also up, but again, 1.6%. Capital expenditures remain the same, and the unassigned balance went down a little bit, but again, within really manageable parameters. And in other funds, we also have a slight increase in revenues, again, the same 2%. A little bit more in expenditures, but again, mostly related to capital. And the projected fund balances are stable at 42.3% across all funds. And with that, I'll just turn it to Marisol to go over actual budget requests.
All right, good evening. Thank you for saving the best for last. I appreciate being here today. So as we're trying to speed through this, just some overview to go back and confirm for you guys that this slide here, as well as the summary you just saw, includes previously approved council amendments. We're rolling that into and including the mid-year adjustments that are new. So this is the total as we see here. It's bringing the amended budget for mid-year revenues in all funds just a little bit above where we were at the adopted budget, and then the mid-year expenditures as well. You'll see that. I'm going to just go through the general fund, and then if you guys have any questions other than that, I think it would be good to highlight the general fund changes. So in these general fund revenues, we do see some swings downward in sales tax, Measure Y, and cannabis, as well as a uptick in the intergovernmental area, which is the child care. So just briefly, sales tax and Measure Y are down from estimates we have received from HDL. Cannabis tax, as we have spoken to in previous quarter 1 and 2 reports, are trending down, and this is the same statewide, so Pacifica is on trend with that. For the intergovernmental category, child care contract, we're showing a mid-year budget adjustment here because we're recognizing previous revenues received. Just want to reiterate, this is a one-time because these are previous years' reimbursements and not something that we are looking to see ongoing as an increase. General fund expenditures, we do have some mid-year adjustments here. And just to briefly go over those, the first $302,000 you see there is previously approved by council. Attachment 2 has all the previously approved with resolutions and council dates of all the adjustments that are included here. But 2 new ones for the general fund expenditures are 101 in related to updates to security, access control and intercoms to the police department building. This one will also bring us in line with some of the compliance that we need for the state. Transfer request of $352,000 is going out to the motor pool. This one is encompassing those previously approved vehicles that you had for on the docket for this budget cycle, as well as some that rolled over into this year from the previous. This is just getting our funding in the right category for those previously approved vehicles. Just in looking at this year with the mid-year adjustments for the general fund, we're still showing a surplus. So that's a good thing, like Yulia said, even with all these adjustments, we still have a surplus balance. And this slide here is just representing that we're still in line with our GFOA goals and our 10% of expenditures. We didn't have to dip into that at all. Some of the other funds here on the next 2 slides, revenues and expenditures, these are also listed on the attachment 3 that lists all of the department forms in detail if you have any additional questions there. But this coincides with, again, the previously approved is 2.6, which is the majority of the increase here. So you guys have already seen those and improved those costs. The mid-year adjustments, there are a couple in this category. I just wanted to point out that you'll see the other end of the motor pool adjustment going into the motor pool fund from the general fund, as well as from wastewater. Those were the biggest ones. Wastewater had this in their budget already. It was just moving it over to the motor pool where the actual purchases happened. Let me switch. So this is the City Council recommendation for the mid-year. We have the increased revenues here by general fund and other revenues, as well as the increase in expenditures, general fund and other revenues, again, mid-year plus previously approved items to get you to the ending mid-year budget amended. The last thing on here is just really a transfer from CIP. There's a 0 impact. There is a form for this, even though there's a $0 impact. The sewer utility fund is looking to transfer funding from active projects to a new sewer rate study project. The reason this is on here is because our CIP policy requires that any transfers from an active project be brought to council for a new project. So this is more of that, just falling in line with policy, but net zero impact there. This is your overview of your mid-year budget adjustments that we're recommending council approve.
And I just want to add one item. This is really important milestone in the budget development process, because mid-year budget review essentially opens up the new budget cycle.
Yeah.
Is that a possibility that we can get something like that ahead of time so we can look at it? I know you gave us the agenda on Wednesday night, so it would be good to have that and look at it not at this time in more detail, so it would be nice to have it earlier.
For the budget?
The budget,
session?
yes.
Yes, absolutely. I will take you through the budget sessions where we'll be talking about the budget, proposed budget, more than once throughout the cycle, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have the whole budget calendar that you will see next time with the study session planned.
Wonderful. Public comment? Is there public comment on this item? Public, do you wish to comment on this item? The public does not, I can see.
They're sleeping.
Is there anyone on the phone, Assistant City Clerk?
No.
All right, then we'll close public comment, bring it back to council. I need a motion to adopt the resolution authorizing the mid-year fiscal 24-25 operating and capital budget adjustments.
So moved.
I'll second. Please vote.
Waiting for one more vote.
Waiting for one more?
Oh, sorry.
No
We're
one-
not.
She's not voting.
Gone.
And with the motion made by Councilmember Beer, seconded by Mayor Beckmeyer, the vote passes 4-0 with Bowles absent.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
We're supposed to be doing.
And it's
our-
not even 12:30.
We're not doing communications.
Oh, jeez.
I'll tell you what I'm communicating.
Yeah. Going home. Good night. Good night. Good night.
Good night, good night.
You've done your stuff first.
I'm very touched. I did too.